At a high school somewhere in the world, there is a special group of students who always target one student to bully. This boy didn't have the courage to resist, and he hated himself for it. Besides himself, he also hated those who turned a blind eye to things, and those who let him suffer even though they could help. But most of all, he hates bullies. Just like he hated his own weakness, day and night he always wished for a chance to rebuild his life. And it seems that happened. When he was summoned to another world, he thought this was an opportunity to redeem himself and move on. But it turns out he is the new savior, known as Yamato Takeru. However, it seems that is no longer true. This world has a powerful existence called the Demon King, scaring people and gradually making their lives miserable. Thinking deeply about it, he had to admit that someone like him, who could not stand up to bullies, could not dare to put his life on the line to fight the Demon King. However, everything seemed to change for the better when he met Saintess Edelweiss, who taught him to be strong for everyone. As a result, he accepts the fact that he is no longer the weak person he was before, but is now someone that people trust and rely on in this world. So, with all his efforts, he wanted to make sure that he would not disappoint himself or those around him. This time, he will persevere for the good of everyone. At first, he encountered many difficulties, as expected for a beginner. But through days and months of perseverance, it seemed like his efforts were paying off. It's all thanks to you trying your best, day and night. However, regardless of the good things he does, people still see him as a bad guy. After months of arduous training, Yamato stood before everyone, now ready to be executed. Due to his amazing skills and strength, people began to see him as a monster. According to the executioner, Yamato is just another person from this world, holding the power to defeat the Demon King. But because they were always on maximum precautions, in their minds they thought that before Yamato betrayed humanity and destroyed the world like everyone else, he had to be dealt with immediately. And as a result, instead of receiving support from these people, he was shackled by sealing magical shackles. Instead of receiving recognition for his efforts, he was treated like an animal. Before being executed, the executioner asked him his last words. But before he could speak, the crowd roared for Yamato's immediate execution. With that situation, Yamato didn't even have a chance to defend himself, let alone look back at his life. But until the end, Yamato remained calm and did not make a scene. However, in the crowd, there was one person who shed tears because of him. The person who shed tears for him was none other than Edelweiss. She tried to help Yamato with everything she had. But it seems her power and strength are not enough. Seeing her fight for him, Yamato felt happy. Whether in Japan or this world, he was never accepted, but at least one person shed tears because of him. Therefore, he is certain that this life would have been a happy life, if only he had been given another chance. Before he could reminisce about those good days, blood began to splatter as Yamato's head was separated from his body. But just a few seconds later, he found himself lying in a hospital bed. He began to wonder if he would ever return to the real world. But that didn't make sense, because he knew for sure that he died that day. Furthermore, the 3 years he spent in the other world couldn't have been just a dream. In the end, he realized that it was pointless to try to think about something he couldn't understand. Therefore, if he wanted to find the answer, he must first confirm the current situation. Looking at his reflection in the window, he was surprised to realize that his body was covered in bruises and broken bones. Although it seemed impossible, he tried to use the power he learned from the other world, and surprisingly, it actually worked. The pain disappeared, and he could finally stand up on his feet. So, the fact that he can use magic proves that everything that happened was not a dream. But the thought that he might be daydreaming still wouldn't leave his mind. Suddenly, a woman, believed to be his mother, along with a doctor entered the room. Seeing Yamato move made them extremely excited. Because no one thought he could recover so soon, especially when his whole body was almost broken, Yamato suddenly standing up surprised everyone. However, the strange thing is that Yamato has no memory of the woman claiming to be his mother. Since he couldn't explain the bullies, he decided to pretend to have amnesia. When his mother asked about what happened, he only replied that he was playing with his friends on the school rooftop. The fence broke and he slipped and fell. Believing him, the doctor continued asking if he remembered his name was Kusanagi Takeru, and Takeru answered yes. When everything was cleared up, the doctor still couldn't believe that Takeru's injuries could heal so quickly. Even for a skilled healer, it was difficult to do. This statement made Takeru wonder, because he did not expect that even though he was no longer in the other world, there were still healers here. A few minutes later, Takeru's father appeared, crying with joy when he saw that his son was still alive. He also said that, even though Takeru doesn't remember them, but he was still happy because his son was safe. At this point, Takeru really didn't understand what was going on, but because this was the first time he felt his parents' love, He promised himself that he would find a way to return this body to its true owner. However, he wanted to enjoy this feeling for a while longer. Although his parents were still worried, Takaru had to undergo many tests. The results showed that he was completely healthy, so he was quickly discharged from the hospital after one day. On the way home, he couldn't deny that the technology in this hospital seemed much more modern than what he was used to. But the only consolation is that everyone here speaks Japanese. This must be Japan. However, there was a cleanliness in the city that he was not used to seeing. If you remember clearly, when he was living in Japan as Takaru Yamato, it was the year 2000. To know the current year, he looked closely at the news that appeared right on the screen next to the steering wheel. According to the news, that day marked the end of May, and they were about to enter the hot spring of 2040. This meant that 40 years had passed since he lived as Yamato. But this was not the reason why Takaru was so shocked. Turns out, this world now also has hunters, people who risk their lives to protect people's daily lives. Some of the monsters the hunters fight are goblins, which confuses Takaru because these monsters are not supposed to be here but only exist in another world. To learn more, he asked his parents about it. According to his mother, hunters really do extraordinary things, because if a hunter is too clumsy, they can lose their life instantly. The fact that they fought with magic as if it were normal showed that everything here was very strange, but normal in this world. Takaru realized that, even though this was Japan, it still bore too many similarities to the other world. Not long after, a monster suddenly attacked them right in front of them. Luckily, thanks to the power he gained from another world, Takaru saved both himself and his parents' lives. But when I thought everything was fine, he was surprised to realize that a space gate had opened. From the gate, groups of goblins began to come out one by one. Based on what Takaru knew, goblins were monsters that even the trained knights of the kingdom would need many people to take down. A normal person wouldn't have a chance to deal with them. But with you, you can easily handle it, because he knew he could also use magic skills. However, Takaru hesitated at the thought of showing off his true power. Because every nail that sticks out will be hammered down, just like what happened in his life in the other world. Not to mention, this body is not yours. If he did something out of the ordinary, when the time came to return his body, it would definitely cause a lot of trouble, and he didn't want to be afraid anymore. So, he decided that the only option now was to run away. But when he was about to do it, he suddenly saw that his parents were almost killed by goblins. Having no other choice, he was forced to use his power. To avoid shocking his parents too much, he made an excuse that there was a hunter nearby who had come to help. His parents felt relieved and continued to leave the scene. Although everything seems to have been resolved, Takaru still has another problem. After he struck, there was an attack from someone else. He wondered if this would become a big problem. However, because his parents were still in shock, Takaru decided to ignore it and think about it later. Because their car broke down, they had no choice but to walk home. Even though it was a long and tiring day, they still felt grateful to have survived. It was a major event, and the lack of casualties was a miracle. After walking for about an hour or two, the three finally arrived home. It seems the time has come for Takeru to start his new life. When he settled in, he knew clearly that if he wanted to live this life as Kusanagi. So if he wants to live as Kusanagi, Takaru needs to gather information. He started looking for a diary in case the original owner of this body had written, but there seemed to be nothing. In fact, the only thing he found was a magazine about hunters. Shows the former owner's interest in them. All the books in the room revolve around this topic. When Takeru flipped through the magazine, he discovered there was a ranking system for the hunters, like they were celebrities. Reading page by page, Takaru came across a note the original owner wrote, expressing his wish that if given the chance to become a hunter, he would love to join a specific guild. After knowing this, Takaru felt a bit strange. Even though I know I'm in Japan, things are not the same at all. He had spent 3 years in another world, so he was getting used to strange things. Furthermore, this was the first time he saw and owned his own phone. Even though he had difficulty using it, he still enjoyed learning. But even though he tried not to be startled every time his phone notified, he still couldn't avoid it. He also realized that he felt more nervous receiving messages from this phone than when confronting the Demon King, especially when he learned that the money for this phone came from Takaru's parents. However, with assurance from his mother, Takaru continued to learn how to use it. In addition, his mother did not want him to return to school right away because of his health condition, which he felt was quite good, because the bullies had just texted him warning him to always be vigilant. Because he had a lot of free time, Takaru used the time to look up a lot of information on his smartphone. He discovers that 30 years ago, after he was summoned to another world, portals connected Earth to that world, and monsters began to pour out. They kill humans, and modern weapons seem to have no effect on these strange creatures. From nowhere, magicians appeared and began fighting monsters. They spread the word that magic is a skill that anyone can learn, making magic an essential subject. Thanks to that, people began to defeat monsters. Those who research magic are known as magicians, and those who destroy monsters are known as hunters. Their role becomes important in handling spacegate breaches and protecting daily life. That's what Takeru read online. To learn more, he decided to walk around the city himself. When scrolling through a lot of information, one thing is certain. Society has truly adapted to magic. The world is no longer real in Takeru's eyes, because everything is so different from what he knows. 40 years have passed, so people have gotten used to these changes. Although he didn't necessarily want to go back to his time, there was no denying that he felt more lonely than he thought. While walking, a woman suddenly screamed for help when her bag was snatched. What's more interesting is that the bag snatcher used magic to escape. Having no other choice, Takeru was forced to use magic to capture the criminal. After a while, the woman thanked Takeru for his help, but they also hid their admiration for his excellent use of magic. After realizing he was faster than expected, Takeru reminded himself to be more careful in the future. Unexpectedly, the old lady gave him some candy as a thank you. This makes Takeru remember the time he spent with his grandmother in his previous life. At this moment, he suddenly realized that even though 40 years had passed and many things had changed, the core values remain unchanged, and he feels happy about that. On the way home, a bully threatened him. Tries to attack Takeru. This person considers himself important, making Takeru realize that such things do not change, no matter what era or world. When this person stood before Takeru, his instincts told him to fight. He continued to ramble, warning that Takeru must not call him disrespectful, and that he must call him Araki-kun, as if he were superior to him. The man kept blaming Takeru, saying it was all his fault when the police suddenly came to the house, causing his father to beat him endlessly. The man's voice grew louder, but Takeru remained calm, letting him vent all his anger on him. In his heart, Takeru thought that after 40 years there were still people like this, proving that the owner of this body had the same problem as his previous life. But compared to his previous life, when he was so afraid of such people that he couldn't do anything, now, for him, fighting dragons in another world is much scarier. Compared to confronting this Araki, Takeru felt like he was just facing an angry dog. That shows that he has grown up, and he also laughs because of this. When he saw Takeru laughing, Araki started to feel insulted and immediately aimed for a punch. But because Takeru was no longer afraid of him, he easily dodged all attacks without even trying. Meanwhile, Araki is having trouble. It seemed Takeru felt the same way. He started wondering what he should do. Even though he could easily knock this guy down with just one punch, because he didn't want to attract attention, he decided to just knock Araki down by stomping on the ground. That was his plan, but in the end, he still punched Araki when the bully started talking bad about Takeru's parents. At this moment, Araki became angrier than ever, because he did not expect Takeru to resist. As a result, Araki used attack magic in a place like this. But before he could counterattack, a portal suddenly appeared. And with just one punch from the monster, Araki is defeated in seconds. Takeru started to worry about him, but it seemed Araki wasn't dead yet. Since there was no one passing by and Araki was eliminated from the fight, Takeru decides to take down this monster himself. With just one powerful punch, he caused more serious damage to the monster than expected. After the short battle, Takeru also closed the gate because he couldn't leave it open, especially since it's like a summoning skill from another world if it doesn't destroy the magic circle. Maybe the gate will disappear. And surprisingly, Takeru's theory was correct. A moment later, a group of officials appeared, causing Takeru to leave in a hurry so that no one would find out he had done this. When the officials arrived, they couldn't believe their eyes, because according to their reports, it was impossible for anyone to take down a bloody goblin with just one blow. When they arrived at the scene, the goblin was dead and the gate was closed, something they completely did not expect. Furthermore, as they continued to investigate, they also discovered a collapsed boy, probably Araki, but other than a few bruises, there was nothing unusual. Also, it seemed Araki had a fight with his classmates, so they concluded that he did all this. However, the higher-ranking official didn't think so, because she couldn't sense enough magical power from Araki to be able to do this. Suddenly, she remembered the time she saw Takeru kill a monster to save his parents, and to learn more, she decided to return to the Hunter Association to investigate. In her mind, the Bloody Goblin was an extremely dangerous monster. The fact that the Bloody Goblin required multiple hunters to deal with made her very curious about this mysterious hunter, who had arrived on the scene just before the Hunter Association arrived. This made her very interested and wanted to know more about what was really going on. After a few weeks off from school, it's time for Takeru to return to the world of learning, at Kazumi High School located in the Tokyo area. When he arrived at school, he was quite surprised because this place was more familiar to him than he thought. Suddenly, on the way to class, he remembered the worried look on his father's face this morning, when he told him that there was no need to go to school if he still didn't want to. In his heart, even though his parents said so, Takeru knew he was fine and had no reason to stay home anymore. In any case, the real Takeru certainly wouldn't like having to repeat a year just because he missed too many classes, which is why Takeru came to school today to fulfill his responsibilities as a student. While waiting on the school grounds, Takeru couldn't help but observe the surroundings, where the students were chatting loudly with each other, just like a normal high school. From Takeru's perspective, the school has a relaxed atmosphere, making him wonder why the real Takeru decided to go so far as to end his life. If his environment was like that, there was only one explanation: perhaps the real Takeru didn't have many friends. This meant that Takeru's situation in his previous life was quite similar to what he thought. However, the only difference was that he had a second chance in another world, where he can practice magic with others, exchange fierce glances with fellow adventurers, and fight or flee from powerful demons. This reminded him of what Edelweiss had said before, that she wanted to create a world where people could laugh naturally. Realizing he was caught up in his thoughts, Takeru quickly woke himself up by gently tapping his face a few times, trying to accept that there was no turning back, and now it was time for him to move on. Firstly, although he seemed nervous, Takeru knew that he would do well, because he dared to face this challenge, thanks to Edelweiss's encouragement. With that determination, he immediately walked into the classroom, where everyone had already taken their seats before the lesson started. Before the lecture, their teacher announced that from that day onwards, Takeru will be returning to class due to the nature of his injury. He is currently suffering from amnesia. The teacher announced to the class that, for this reason, the teacher hopes everyone can help and support Takeru to overcome this difficulty. Right after the introduction, Takeru quickly returned to his seat, and it seemed like his classmates didn't care much about his return. Then suddenly, Araki walked into the classroom, looking proud because everyone now thought he had defeated the bloody goblin the day before. He was so complacent that he even declared that this was completely obvious to someone as great as him. However, when he saw Takeru sitting at the back of the classroom, he couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed, because Takeru was the only one who witnessed the goblin defeating him with just one punch. Instead of teasing Takeru like usual, Araki decided to ignore him, which was strange to everyone, because Araki never behaved like that. While everyone was focused on Araki, a student seemed worried about Takeru. A shy boy wearing glasses approached and asked if Takeru was okay, considering he's losing his memory. After realizing that Takeru probably didn't remember him, the glasses-wearing boy introduced himself. "I'm Sawamura Takeru." In the past, Sawamura often chatted with the real Takeru, as they both had a passion for hunters. This revelation surprised Takeru, because he did not expect that the real owner of this body had friends. As the school day passed and it was time for school to end, Takeru couldn't deny that he felt more tired than he expected. Although it was undeniable that he had become stronger physically and mentally after coming to the other world, his intelligence was not the same. Even in high school, he always forgot to review, and now that textbooks are no longer made of paper, studying has become even more difficult. Even though he was in crisis, Takeru surprised himself that, even with his memory loss, he still looked pretty good. He quickly reassured Sawamura that there was no need to worry, as he was improving every day. After chatting for a while, Takeru asked Sawamura about his previous self, referring to the true owner of this body. Without hesitation, Sawamura affirmed, "Takeru is the best person in the world." The group of bullies tried to interrupt the conversation between Takeru and Sawamura, but Araki seemed to tease Takeru less than before. Maybe because of what happened between them the other day. However, to avoid being seen as weak, Araki explained that he did not want to get involved with Takeru anymore because it would only cause more trouble. Instead of targeting Takeru, Araki's group turns to Takeru as their next target. At first, they pretended they were going to the library to study, but knowing the bullies' personalities, that wasn't true. As soon as Araki and his group left, Takeru immediately asked his classmates where that group took Takeru. At first, he thought that maybe they had gone to the rooftop. But after what happened, the school took strict measures and closed that entrance. This means they took Takeru to the industrial area behind the school. Takeru's haste to help his friend surprised his classmates, because before losing his memory, he had never been so fierce. Meanwhile, in the industrial area, Araki and his friends were questioning Takeru, and every time he couldn't answer, they beat him mercilessly. While all that was going on, Takeru observed the whole situation from the shadows. Even though he wanted to rush in to help Takeru still didn't want to change Takeru's situation too much. He tried to avoid attracting attention, because that could make things confusing. However, when Takeru recalls Takeru voluntarily coming to protect him, this begins to motivate him. But that still wasn't enough reason to make Takeru immediately intervene. As the minutes passed, Araki and his group continued to throw and punch Takeru as if he were just a toy, even mockingly asked him to call Takeru to help. It was what Takeru said next that made Takeru change his mind. Takeru admitted that he felt guilty letting his friend, whom he considered his best friend, had to suffer at the hands of these bullies just to make sure he was safe. That's why now that Takeru is back, he has the courage to make sure he won't repeat the mistake of abandoning his friends when they need him the most. Hearing this made Takeru's heart burn, because this was the first time he saw someone willing to risk their life for him. And then, Takeru knew it was time for him to protect his friend. A few seconds after Takeru arrived at the scene, he suddenly fainted, causing the remaining bullies to laugh, calling him weak, not even strong enough to be a punching bag. But to Takeru, his friend is as strong as anyone else. When they saw him standing up to confront the group of bullies, they couldn't help but be surprised, because they didn't expect that he would have enough courage to face them. They believe that the loss of memory has driven Takeru crazy, and think they can defeat him with just one blow. However, they do not know that Takeru is no longer the person they once knew. With just one punch, Takeru easily defeated them all, leaving them so surprised that they were speechless. But because Araki's subordinates were too arrogant, instead of running away to save their lives, they tried to counterattack, only to be completely defeated. Seeing his comrades being beaten to a pulp by Takeru, Araki became so angry that he started acting like he wanted to join the fight. But before he could do that, Takeru stopped him, warned that if he didn't change his habit of barking, he would annoy others. Instead of being afraid, Araki kept his ego, claiming that he didn't want his friends to think he was weaker than Takeru. This made the remaining guys still have the courage to rush at Takeru, even though they clearly had no chance of winning. He remembered the time he participated in the battle with the Demon King's army, when he was too honest and spared someone just because he said he was forced to fight for the Demon King. Takeru sympathized, but because of that soft-heartedness, the village he needed to protect was destroyed. Thanks to that lesson, Takeru realized that once he starts something, he cannot do it half-heartedly. That's why from now on, you will never repeat that mistake again, especially when you are extremely angry. He decided to defeat this group of bullies at any cost. But before he could take action, a blue portal suddenly appeared, causing all three bullies to panic. And when a goblin appeared from the gate, they all didn't know what to do. Ogres are the most dangerous monsters that can appear from a green portal. But when they saw Araki there, his group of friends felt reassured, thinking that he could easily defeat this monster, based on his previous defeat of the bloody goblin. Since he couldn't reveal that he wasn't the one who defeated that goblin, Araki acted strong and pretended to be about to attack the monster with his magic. However, as he predicted, his magic was nothing compared to real hunters. In the end, the ogre only needed one punch to defeat him. As a result, Araki's friends panicked and ran away. Meanwhile, Takeru still calmly stood aside. And as expected, the ogre started rushing towards him. But with just one blow, Takeru quickly defeated the ogre. Witnessing this, Araki was horrified, even starting to fear Takeru, calling him a monster. As Takeru approached, Araki asked him to stay away from him, but it seems Araki misunderstood. Takeru just wanted to help him a little by using his healing ability to ease the pain from the previous blow. Then suddenly, Takeru slammed his hand on the ground, shattering the ground with just one touch. He then asked Araki to tell everyone that he was the one who defeated the ogre, because Takeru doesn't want to attract attention and just wants a peaceful life. At first, Araki did not want to agree, but after a conversation, he finally agreed to play that role. Additionally, Takeru warned Araki not to harass him and his friends from now on. At the same time, ask him to stop bullying others. If there is a next time, Takeru will not let him survive. When the hunters were on their way, Takeru quickly leaves, taking Takeru with him and reminding Araki to do well in deceiving the officials. At Orin Hunter Training Academy, one of the hunters reported that she had been sent to deal with the gate and the ogre at Kazumi's school. But when she arrived, everything had been resolved. This hunter also reported that a lone male student at the scene, probably Araki, claimed to have defeated the monster himself. However, the amount of magical power left at the scene exceeded the limit of a human, which could only be due to the presence of a monster or another person. Seeing the way the hunter trembled, that meant the person behind that was not a normal person. Realizing that this was an interesting case, the head of the organization decided to directly investigate. Check Araki's description and realize that it's likely someone else defeated the goblin. When looking through the report, the investigator accidentally discovered that Araki seemed to be having an argument with someone, meaning that there was another person at the scene, but when officials arrived, no one was found. Other than Araki, is that person really behind all of this? Although there was still no concrete evidence, she decided to ask Araki to clarify everything. It's all for everyone's benefit. And the person leading this investigation is none other than the S-rank hunter, Sakura. After a few days, the whole class, including Araki's group of friends, were surprised by his sudden change. They found this both funny and strange as Araki now looked much more formal and serious. Even when his friends tried to tease Takeru, Araki immediately stopped them, leaving Takeru completely confused. But before things get any weirder, Takeru appears, changing the atmosphere. During the conversation, Takeru asked Takeru if he knew what happened to Araki, since he had been acting strange all morning. Instead of telling the truth, Takeru just replied that perhaps Araki had decided to become more diligent, and this is a good thing. When the bell rang signaling the start of class, Sakura also went to Kazumi's school to conduct her investigation. Nowadays, everyone knows that all hunters are governed by the Hunter Association. Therefore, the thought of someone holding such great power freely acting as he wished made Sakura extremely worried. That's why she was determined to find that unusual person, even if she had to do everything. While preparing to enter the school, she happened to meet another S-rank hunter, Abikawa Jin, also known by the nickname Orochi. Orochi immediately asked Sakura why she came here, but before she could answer, he interrupted, saying there was no need to answer. Sakura immediately asked Orochi if it was okay to appear here, because he was the president of the Ouroboros Guild. Orochi was in charge of the Tokai area, so he immediately reassured Sakura that there was no need to worry, as their guild had many excellent people. Just through this conversation, the tension between the two people was clearly seen. In Sakura's heart, she firmly believed that Orochi could not have come here without a reason. Understanding that Orochi's Ouroboros Guild was famous for its strong recruitment methods, it was likely that he came here because of that abnormality. Simply put, Orochi may be looking to increase his power by recruiting another talented hunter. As the two S-rank hunters were discussing, they were suddenly interrupted by a magical portal that suddenly opened right on the campus. Students began to panic. Teachers quickly asked everyone to stay calm and evacuate in order. Sakura was immediately alert, preparing to move in to help, but she was surprised to see that Orochi did not come with him, but turned in the opposite direction. He coldly said that Sakura could handle it herself, and that he himself didn't have time to deal with these trivial matters. Orochi's words made Sakura extremely uncomfortable, because she thought he was not performing his duties as a hunter. However, what Sakura didn't know was that Orochi had sensed something different. It seemed that the magic he felt when the magic portal opened was much stronger than expected, so he wanted to prepare thoroughly before facing it, leaving the initial handling to Sakura. When Sakura arrived, the whole school was in chaos. It seemed like there were more enemies than she thought. Gathering all her strength, Sakura tried to save as many students as possible, making sure they all got out safely. She checked each room carefully. What's surprising is that some students with combat experience can take care of themselves. After all, the skeletons and ghosts were just low-level monsters, so the students could manage. However, this strange situation could cause trouble because the students have never received any training. Therefore, Sakura continues to carry out her mission, helping everyone to the best of her ability. As she rushed to where the gate appeared, Sakura was surprised to see Takeru creating a magic circle to try and calm the situation. As soon as she saw him in the room, Sakura immediately recognized him as the abnormal person she had been looking for so long. Knowing that someone had discovered him, as soon as he closed the gate, Takeru hurriedly ran away from Sakura as quickly as possible. However, it seems that Sakura is determined to capture this strange person at all costs. While Takeru ran at full speed, Sakura used thunder acceleration to quickly chase after him. Sakura herself was surprised to see that Takeru only used a simple physical enhancement skill but was much faster than a normal person. Even her thunder acceleration skill should have given her an edge in speed, but that didn't seem to happen. However, the possibility that she could catch up still existed, so Takeru did not dare turn around, avoiding revealing his face to Sakura. But there was no doubt that Takeru could feel Sakura's pressure even at this distance, even though Takeru could accelerate if he wanted, because the physical enhancement skill was magic that increased the body's abilities, but for some reason, he could not do so. This was Takeru Kusanagi's limit. If he was in his original, trained body, it's possible he would have run kilometers away. Even if I think more deeply about this, it won't change anything. After all, magic originated from the soul, and he had control over it, but if he let it go now, it would be dangerous. The idea of training Takeru's body came to mind, but for now he needed to focus on hiding his identity as much as possible. Using flight enhancement, Takeru instantly disappeared into the air thanks to his speed. At this point, Sakura decided to temporarily give up chasing him. Meanwhile, a few minutes later, Takeru was quite far away from the school. Judging by what happened, today's classes were definitely cancelled, so there was no longer any reason for Takeru to come back. While on the way home, Takeru started thinking about the fact that the person who chased him was probably a hunter. When he looked it up online, he thought they were like knights or adventurers from another world, but it seemed the difference was quite far from what he thought. That's why Takeru decided not to be negligent anymore. As soon as he arrived home, his mother hugged her son tightly, happy to see him safe. It seems the parents heard about the ogre appearing at Takeru's high school. Because he didn't answer the phone, his parents were extremely worried about him. Speaking of the phone, Takeru started looking for it, guessing that he had lost it at school. To his surprise, his mother said that a friend of his had brought the phone home for him and was now in the living room. Takeru's mother wanted him to personally thank his friend. As soon as he saw the person his mother was referring to, Takeru stopped dead in his tracks, because it was none other than Sakura, who looked amused at the sight of Takeru's surprised face. Despite trying my best to hide my identity, Takeru still acted as if he wasn't the one who was being chased earlier and just thanked Sakura for returning the phone. However, it seems Sakura had realized what Takeru was trying to hide. She frankly said that she wanted to ask him something. Takeru, still trying to act ignorant, smiled wryly and asked Sakura what those questions were. Without hesitation, Sakura mentioned the incident at the abandoned factory yesterday. And the bloody ogre incident just happened. At this point, Takeru realized that he could no longer hide. Things were much worse than he thought, because now there was no way to escape. Besides, he couldn't talk about things openly here, especially when his mother was listening. So, Takeru tried to distract his mother, hoping she would let the two of them have private space to talk. Luckily, after a minute of hesitation, his mother left. To be able to talk clearly, Takeru decided to lead Sakura to his room. As soon as the door closed, Sakura immediately asked Takeru who he really was. This shocked Takeru, because he did not expect Sakura to go straight to the point like that. Even if Sakura asked who he was, Takeru had no intention of revealing anything. So Sakura declared that, depending on his answer, she might be forced to restrain him if she had no other choice. At this time, Takeru began to feel that Sakura was a rather rude person. And he gradually realized that, if he lied clumsily, Sakura would find out sooner or later. But even if he told the truth that he was a hero from another world, there was a high possibility that Sakura would think it was just a joke. Seeing that Takeru was more silent than usual, Sakura's patience began to run out. She ended up pinning him against the wall, putting them both in an extremely awkward situation. It seemed like Sakura really thought that Takeru was doing something wrong, so he kept quiet. To clarify the situation, Takeru explained that that was not the case. Actually, he had amnesia, so technically speaking, he didn't remember anything. But if that's the case, how can he fight monsters? Furthermore, he seems to be able to sense and use magic very well, to the point that even in emergency situations, he remains calm. Takeru tried to talk calmly with Sakura to avoid arguing too much. To make the story seem convincing, he continued to say that he himself did not know why he was able to do that. However, just as Takeru predicted, this excuse went too far and only made Sakura more suspicious. Unsatisfied with the answer, she continued to ask why he hid his powers. Surprisingly, this time Takeru answered frankly, saying that even if he suddenly received power, he would not want to use it. Because if you use your power, it will scare many people. In addition, Takeru did not want to worry his parents and had absolutely no intention of becoming a hunter. However, it seemed like Sakura didn't believe him, because no one would turn down the opportunity to have high social status, fame, and everything that came with it. Without hesitation, Takeru answered seriously, that he didn't need those things, just living peacefully was enough. This surprised Sakura, because she did not expect Takeru's reasons to be so profound. At this point, Sakura began to understand Takeru's point of view. As long as he doesn't use his power for bad things, then she and the Hunter Association have nothing more to say. Additionally, Sakura also assured Takeru that she would report to the association that everything had been resolved, so that they would not investigate further. This reaction of Sakura was not what Takeru expected, so he was a bit surprised at first. Sakura explained that, although she didn't believe it right away, but when she realized that all Takeru did was protect others, she couldn't help but see the truth. The discussion ends here. Before leaving, Sakura apologized to Takeru for chasing him unexpectedly and being violent in his house. Seeing Sakura bowing before him made Takeru somewhat uncomfortable, so he quickly reassured her that there was no need to worry. Then, with a serious expression, Sakura suddenly asked Takeru to think about becoming a hunter, so that others could live in peace. Because after all, he couldn't hide his power forever. But if Takeru truly decides to live a normal and peaceful life, then Sakura will do her best to protect that, no matter what. Hearing those words, Takaru suddenly remembered Edelweiss, making him realize that there are still good people in this world. A few days later, Takaru decided to go out for a jog, because exercise calmed him down. The school is still temporarily closed due to the recent disaster, so this is what Takaru has been doing these past few days. On a particular day, in the middle of a run, a black portal suddenly appeared. The authorities intervened just in time to ensure everything was under control, as it took some time for the black gate to completely break and powerful monsters to flood out. Technically, it is possible to close the gate and prevent any damage to this world by defeating the boss monster. Seeing so many people gathered around, Takaru began to wonder if they were waiting for the hunters to return. In addition, he also wondered if inside that gate was another world, maybe the world he used to know. The thought of entering that gate crossed Takaru's mind. As Takaru was about to enter the gate, the Wind Guard appeared, attracting his attention and reassuring him that there was no need to be afraid anymore. The Wind Guard group is widely mentioned as consisting of 4 members: Shirai Chika, Tomita Yuichi, Amamiya Matsuri, and group leader Gato Mamoru. When this group appeared, the crowd became much more exciting. Witnessing their bond, Takaru suddenly remembered the time when he was in another world. Gato Mamoru reminded him of the general he had trained with before, which made him smile a little. Flashback. The kingdom's General Grado was the one who helped Takaru develop his swordsmanship and fighting skills. However, no matter how hard he tried, Takaru still could not defeat Grado. That doesn't mean Grado doesn't appreciate you. In reality, at that time, Takaru was a messiah, someone chosen by the gods. And Grado is confident that Takaru's physical strength and magical abilities will grow at an amazing rate in the coming years. However, Takaru always wondered why he couldn't hit Grado even once. Grado explains that, no matter how fast someone is, a strong attack always leaves an opening. It all depends on how Takaru uses his power. That means Takaru can create opportunities for himself. The conversation was going smoothly when a demon suddenly appeared out of thin air. This was a type of demon they had never seen before, leaving them both confused as to how it could approach. While they were wondering, the demon found an opening and attacked, injuring Grado. Takaru, paralyzed by fear, could do nothing to help the general. Grado, always putting the lives of others first, told Takeru to flee immediately while the demon was still distracted by him. But Takaru didn't have the courage to leave Grado behind. However, after Grado earnestly asked him to leave, because he couldn't bear to lose another important person after losing his wife and son, Takaru found himself rushing straight towards the demon, cutting it in half even though he really wanted to run away. You can't use the general as bait. And moreover, Takeru has decided that he will no longer be the same person. With everything he could, he tried to destroy the monster at all costs. Finally, with strong determination, Takaru suddenly defeated the demon, much to Grado's surprise. When he saw Grado, Takaru remembered the general again, because they had something in common. Speaking of practice, it had been 3 hours since Takaru started, but his ears still felt strange. Instead of thinking too much about it, he decided to focus on doing more cardio to increase his endurance. Regarding his diet, since his body had no problem losing weight, Takaru decided not to change it anymore. Certainly, this new body felt different from his old one, and that's why he needed to adjust so as not to change his physical appearance too much. As he was peacefully thinking about his next training journey, the Wing Guard group had returned, but there seemed to be a problem. One of the members, Chika, was still inside the gate because she had decided to act as bait so the team could escape. Gato felt unable to forgive himself for letting that happen. Hearing this, Takeru realized that he was witnessing a different future from the previous time. And if no one comes to the rescue, the situation will get worse for the group. Then suddenly, Takeru realized he was inside the gate, without knowing when. He had unconsciously walked in when his mind was disturbed before. Now inside, unable to do anything else, Takeru decided to go find Chika himself. As he began to survey the surrounding area, a monster discovered him. The question now is, can Takeru survive this dangerous situation? Takeru felt a bit nostalgic when entering this world. He couldn't determine whether this was the parallel world he had been in, or whether it was simply the forest that evoked old memories. However, he noticed that all the monsters here were very familiar. After a while, Takeru realized that this world was the world he once belonged to. Suddenly, Chika appeared from somewhere, chased by a one-eyed monster. In a panic because she was worried about her teammates, Chika stumbled, creating an opportunity for the monster to attack. But before the situation got worse, Takeru promptly used ice magic to block the attack. Takeru's appearance surprised Chika. She did not expect someone to come to her rescue so quickly. For his part, Takeru also said that he was glad to have arrived on time. Although Chika had a few bruises, that seemed to be all. To avoid being asked about his identity, Takeru just said that he was a passerby. However, it seemed like Chika didn't believe him. because she quickly recognized that this strange man was the boy they had seen outside the gate, due to his identical outfit and voice. Chika's sharp memory made Takeru a bit confused. Since he had been discovered, he had no reason to continue hiding. Chika, who is in charge of investigating and scouting hunters, has very sharp observation abilities. Perhaps that's why she easily recognized Takeru from the beginning. Before things get complicated, Takeru urges her to move quickly, because everyone outside is very worried about her. Hearing this, Chika felt relieved, because it meant that her teammates were safe. However, somewhere within the gate, the boss of this place is very excited, because the moment for the biggest battle is coming. As they returned to the gate, Chika began to wonder how Takeru had so much power, even though he didn't have any tools with him. Furthermore, the ice magic he used was only at a basic level, nothing special. Not only that, Takeru looked like he was dressed to go to a convenience store, so it was unlikely that he had just entered a gate full of monsters. This makes Chika wonder more and more who this boy really is. While thinking, Takeru suddenly stopped, making her confused. Then suddenly, an attack from the gate boss came towards them. The huge explosion and chaotic scene made Chika almost faint because she was too scared to move. Takeru had to pick her up and run. Meanwhile, Takeru's strength also surprised the gate boss, because the boy had just destroyed her pet and then disappeared. This forces the gate boss to take the battle more seriously. Knowing that things would get more complicated, Takeru asked Chika if she had brought any items that could conceal the area when leaving the gate, and it seemed like she had. As they approached the gate, Takeru asked Chika to keep him a secret, which she had expected. Before leaving, Takeru made sure Chika went first so no one would see him. On the other hand, the gate boss was not satisfied at all, because she still wanted to continue playing with them. But now that the gate is closed, she can only hope to see them again next time. Outside, the wing guard group was happy to see that Chika was safe. Meanwhile, Takeru hides behind the trees, checking to see if Chika is okay, trying to hide his identity to avoid attracting attention. A few days after the incident, Takeru's classes resumed. At school, it seems like Araki has changed a lot, not only in the way he acts but also in the way he dresses. What's more notable is that the relationship between Araki and Takeru seems to be developing in some way. Currently, Takeru and his two friends no longer study at their old school, because their high school has decided to temporarily let all three study at Uran Academy, because the old school is in the process of being repaired after the disaster caused by gate break caused. This surprised all three people, because this was not what they expected. When the incident occurred, each hunter training school decided to allocate space so that classes could continue. The learning content will be adjusted to suit the schools, almost like a form of internship. This temporary academy was expanded to be both a place of learning and to function as a shelter. This was Takeru's first time experiencing this, like most people. That got them a little excited, and being sent to Uran Academy only made things more exciting. However, Takeru couldn't deny that he had mixed feelings when Araki also came along. Immediately, Takeru assured that Araki would not be able to cause trouble here, because after all, this was one of the most prestigious academies in the country. There was no way Araki could act arrogant in this place. Therefore, Takeru advised Takeru to temporarily forget about Araki so that the group could best enjoy this experience. As expected, Uran Academy is impressive. The famous hunter Takamina Sakura is also here. In addition, there are many alumni of the academy who are currently topping the rankings. Studying here is like a dream come true for Takeru. While Takeru kept going on about how impressed he was with the academy, Takeru realized that almost all the students here carried weapons, ready to fight at any time. However, his observations were interrupted when Takeru started asking if he had met Sakura in person, because she was the one who picked up his phone and asked for his address. Since there was no reason to lie, Takeru answered honestly. This makes Takeru a little jealous. Driven by curiosity, Takeru continued to ask if Takeru had exchanged contact information with Sakura. Takeru just smiled awkwardly and avoided answering. Luckily, Takeru finally stopped bothering him with those questions. Instead, Takeru mentions that he heard Sakura has a very passionate fan club, and advises Takeru to be careful if he comes into close contact with Sakura, because no one knew what that club might do if they found out that Sakura had returned the phone to Takeru herself. At that moment, Sakura suddenly appeared, attracting everyone's attention. All eyes turned towards her. Takeru couldn't deny that he was truly impressed by her presence. Even on campus, Sakura still exuded the air of an out-of-reach flower, as Takeru described. This makes Takeru wonder if Sakura has close friends. When Sakura glanced at him, Takeru suddenly smiled and greeted her, making Takeru extremely surprised, because he didn't think Takeru would behave like that. Realizing his actions, Takeru felt embarrassed for a moment, and to avoid embarrassment, he quickly ran to the cafeteria, completely ignoring Takeru behind. After class, Sakura and Takeru have a meeting. During this meeting, Sakura informed Takeru that, after he helped Chika the previous day, even though your identity hasn't been revealed as promised, but people started to become more curious about him. This led to many people conducting their own investigations on Takeru. Sakura also said that there will be a limit to how much she can help cover up Takeru's identity, especially when the Hunter Association is in an uproar. That meant things would become more difficult for him. Based on Sakura's investigation, they could estimate the strength of the boss in the Black Gate based on the amount of mana. When Wingard's group entered the gate the other day, the gate was D rank, and the group of C rank hunters should have completed the mission within 10 minutes. However, an A-level Cyclops appeared, causing them many difficulties. Furthermore, what makes the story more interesting but also confusing is the appearance of an unusual person, Takeru, that no one expected. Because he was not registered with the association, his appearance on the scene made many people ask, is this person a friend or an enemy? Sakura also theorized that, if there was an enemy who possessed magical power as strong as Takeru, it would definitely cause a rebellion. This made Takeru feel a bit guilty for jumping into the situation without thinking it through. Realizing that she seemed a bit harsh in her approach, Sakura reassured Takeru that there was no need to worry too much, because what he did was completely right. Even though he has special powers, Takeru is still just a citizen who wants a peaceful life that he must protect. Sakura smiled seductively and asked Takeru to promise that he would protect his life at all costs, and leave the dangerous matters to the hunters, as his parents would definitely worry if he continued to venture out. Get into such situations. After discussing important points, they ended the meeting. On the way back to class, Takeru realized that Sakura's kindness was the reason why everyone admired her. Before he could relax, suddenly, a group of goblins started rushing towards them. Seeing that, Takeru was no longer as scared as before, because he was used to these unexpected situations. But because of the conversation just now, he didn't feel like making the first move. After a while, a group of hunter students rushed forward to handle the situation. Although the fighting was very satisfying, what surprised Takeru was that this group was Sakura's fan club that he had heard about. The club president, Yodoin, is more active than Takeru thought. This group of A-rank hunters seemed eager to make friends with Takeru, but he was not very enthusiastic. Yodoin, finding Takeru's silence strange, immediately concluded that Takeru was probably wondering about the Urin Guild. Even though Takeru didn't ask, Yodoin still explained everything. Due to admiring Sakura so much, Yodoin describes her as a beautiful goddess who needs to be protected. Her admirers gathered together and defended the city. With an ever-increasing membership, the club is now the largest society on campus, protecting public peace. This makes Takeru wonder if this is still just a fan club. Bayu. Duin continues to explain that the only condition for joining the club is to love and respect Sakura. Whether you're not a hunter, just a supporter, or do any other job, there's still plenty to do in this guild. It was because of the way Takeru looked at Sakura that Byuduin got the idea that maybe Takeru really wanted to join their club. Based on Byuduin's perspective, he found Takeru very suitable to become a part of the club, perhaps because of the aura of power Takeru exuded. However, Takeru knew clearly that he was not good at handling people like Byuduin, but it seemed that Byuduin had decided that Takeru should participate, especially after seeing how unusually calm he was when the monster almost attacked him before. Byuduin realized that was not normal behavior at all. And it seems things have gone further than expected. Immediately, Takeru tried to clarify everything. He explained to Byuduin that he was just surprised at that time, so he stood still, but there was really nothing special. Suddenly, Sakura appeared, hastily checking to see if everyone was okay, because she sensed the portal that had appeared just before. Since the situation had been resolved, Takeru planned to tell Sakura that there was a team handling the incident. But when he was about to introduce them, he was stunned when he realized that the group had disappeared. Takeru had to ignore it and never mention it again. The next morning, Takeru was still wondering about the group he met yesterday, but regardless of their purpose, he wanted to avoid getting involved even more. However, he could not help but be surprised that such a large guild existed in the school. This was no longer a surprise to Takeru, though, as Sakura's influence was clear from the start. That's why he wanted to be more cautious and avoid hindering their work so as not to cause trouble for himself. However, it seems that Byuduin is determined to invite Takeru to join their club. When Takeru was preparing for morning class, he suddenly saw Byuduin waiting at the door. Even though Takeru didn't want anything to do with this person. But you seem to have no other choice. Because Byuduin is also part of the class. Throughout the lecture and even after it ended, Byuduin always paid attention to Takeru. This made him feel uncomfortable. Besides, Takeru, an avid fan of Byuduin, kept telling Takaru about the talent of the Byuduin family heir, making him even more annoyed. A famous spearmanship family that has existed for over 1,000 years, the Byuduin family is known for its incredible strength, to the point where the Byuduin were once called prodigies. Additionally, he is one of the 5 best hunters at Ouran Academy. This makes Takeru realize that Byuduin is truly outstanding even without a club. Takaru is looking forward to the next class at the Academy's training ground, to witness Byuduin's talent firsthand. This lesson made Takeru quite excited, because training sessions like this don't exist in any normal school, unless someone from the association comes to teach. Including this training session in the curriculum shows that Ouran Academy is truly prestigious. During the training session, the school uses DS monsters to train students to fight in real life. The type of monster DS often uses is slime, which according to the professor, is a good monster to learn basic skills. These slimes change shape based on data fed into DS House, short for doppelganger slime. Seeing them transform into goblin form, Takaru wondered if it was okay to let the students fight them. But then, he realized that these were just fake monsters, created by magicians for practice, so there was nothing to worry about. When the training session began, many potential students gradually demonstrated their abilities after each match. Professors provide constructive advice to help them develop in the long term. When it was Byuduin's turn to show off his skills, everyone was amazed by his amazing technique. After a few minutes, it was finally Takeru, Takaru and Araki's turn to show off their skills. Before starting, the professor asked Takeru to choose his weapon first. These weapons can be used by hunters or magicians. If the professor had advice, he would suggest Takeru start with swords. After all 3 chose, they took position to begin the attack. As soon as the bell rang, Takaru and Araki immediately rushed in, while Takeru stood outside and watched. This confused many people, but what happened next surprised the audience. When there was only one enemy left, everyone thought that Takaru would not attack again. But surprisingly, the enemy was defeated without anyone seeing Takaru swing his sword. This shows that Takaru's sword technique is not inferior to ranked hunters. Because he didn't want people to think he was too good, Takaru quickly asked Araki to help cover it up, blaming it on the slime not realizing it had been slashed. Although Araki did not want to participate in this game, he was forced to agree, leaving Takaru confused when he saw that the two suddenly seemed closer. Meanwhile, it seems that Byuduin's interest in Takaru is deepening. Especially after he saw Takeru fight with his own eyes. The next day after the training session, Takaru went to the library to find a way to return his body to its rightful owner. However, he gradually realized that this was not simple at all. Even so, Takaru already had an idea of who he could ask for clues. There was a magazine he received from Sawamura, which had a story quite similar to his situation. The girl in the magazine also experienced the same thing, but her soul remained intact, unlike Takaru, who had no real soul in this body. This makes Takeru wonder if the original owner of this body still exists inside. As he was pondering this matter, Byuduin suddenly appeared, clearly wanting to approach Takaru again. After becoming more interested in learning about Takaru, Byuduin concludes that Takeru is probably hiding his true power. But instead of being shocked or worried, Takaru remained calm, which made Byuduin even more insistent that he was hiding something. However, Takaru did not let himself be overwhelmed and simply replied that he was just a normal student with amnesia. However, it seems Byuduin doesn't believe this explanation. To test that, Byuduin asked Takeru to participate in a duel, but Takaru immediately refused. However, when Byuduin mentioned Hunter Wasugi, who appeared in Takaru's magazine, he became interested in talking to Byuduin, because he wanted to know more about this legendary hunter. Byuduin reveals that he met Wasugi at a gathering of fighters, but Wasugi has probably returned home by now. She often takes refuge in sacred mountains, so meeting her is not easy. However, Byuduin can use his family's connections to find a way to meet Wasugi. This means that Byuduin can help Takeru, but only if Takeru agrees to a duel with him, using several domesticated creatures that appear on campus. Takeru and Byuduin begin their match. Right from the start of the fight, the way Takeru held his sword and moved made Byuduin realize that his guesses were correct. Takaru is actually stronger than he looks. However, Takaru could not deny that Byuduin was also very strong. But since there was an agreement, Takaru tries his best to ensure that he wins at all costs. When using the Bloodburst skill, Byuduin began to feel like he was facing death, causing him to be overwhelmed by Takaru's presence. And in the end Takaru won. Instead of being sad, Byuduin is suddenly happy, as this confirms that Takaru is who he thought he was. Much stronger and braver. Suddenly, the large pillar stuck to the wall transformed into a minotaur. Takaru immediately got ready to deal with this monster. But Byuduin promptly stopped him, asking him to run away. Even though Byuduin now knew about Takaru's true power, he did not want to let him shoulder the responsibilities that a member of the Urin Guild had to do. Even though he was defeated by Takaru with just one finger, Byuduin understood that Takaru just wanted to become a normal person. As the club president, Byuduin wants to realize Sakura's ideals and takes on the task of protecting Takeru at all costs. Byuduin also apologized to Takeru, said he knew you wanted to keep your identity hidden, but accidentally pulled him into the match. To atone for his mistakes, Byuduin promises to become a selfless and kind person, like his idol. 4 years ago, at the Byuduin family's dojo, Byuduin Soma, then a first grader in middle school, continuously won matches. The other students couldn't believe he was so strong. With such strength, everyone assumed that Byuduin was well endowed. Only the head of the family can defeat this prodigy boy. However, Byuduin's father was not satisfied with his attitude. He believes that skill alone is not enough, but real strength is needed. To tease his father, Byuduin even imitated his words, saying that one must always protect and lead people with an unshakable heart in the face of all difficulties. Hearing these words day after day made Byuduin feel bored. When practice ended, he rushed home, ignoring his angry father. Despite his happy and confident appearance, Byuduin actually enjoys being complimented and sees this as a special talent. Living in a big house and having good looks also gives him confidence that others don't have. Despite his carefree appearance, Byuduin admires his father for his sincere words for protecting others. However, no matter what angle one looks at, to Byuduin, a strong person is always a strong person. In his heart, he believed that monsters were easy to defeat, so he didn't care much about what his father said. Therefore, when given the opportunity to face a black gate, Byuduin immediately rushed in with the goal of gaining real combat experience to prove that he was right. But the gate he entered was extremely dangerous, making the adults outside worry about him. Even though they tried to stop Byuduin, there was nothing they could do once he was inside. They couldn't just step in and help him, because there was a chance they'd get killed too. Everyone could only pray that an A-rank hunter would soon arrive to help. Luckily, after a few minutes, an A-rank hunter appeared, telling everyone to stay back because it was not safe to stand near the gate. Meanwhile, inside the gate, Byuduin couldn't believe what he was witnessing. All this time, he thought his skills were enough to destroy all monsters, but now he realized he was wrong. When a monster grabbed his arm, at that moment, he thought that this was his end. However, the surprising thing was that someone came to rescue him, something he did not expect. Byuduin started wondering what was going on, why only one person came to save him, and whether this woman can defeat the monster alone. Although he wanted to move, fear kept Byuduin unable to move. Meanwhile, his rescuer is also having difficulty confronting the monster. But instead of worrying about Byuduin, she remained calm and even asked him if he was hurt. Even though it was she who was injured. It was at this moment that Byuduin began to understand what his father had said about true strength. This was also the time he realized that he was truly weak and fragile. And this girl, even though she was injured, still smiled widely as if she had defeated all the monsters. She hurriedly ran to Byuduin and said that it was time to go back because everything was fine. That's why, when he found himself in a similar situation to Takeru, Byuduin decided to change himself, not wanting to continue being weak anymore. He wanted to become stronger so that if he fought alongside Takeru, he wouldn't feel ashamed. Even though the Minotaur was an A-rank monster, Byuduin told himself that he had to defeat it at all costs. However, Takeru noticed something in Byuduin's fighting style. Although Byuduin's skills were clearly excellent, he seemed too cautious. According to Takeru's observation, simplifying the way of fighting would be more effective, since his opponent was a monster, not a human. To help Byuduin, Takeru decided to activate the magical power hidden in Byuduin's body. This is only a temporary boost, and may make Byuduin feel like he's about to die afterward. But Takeru is confident that this will give him enough strength to send the monster flying. After the powerful blow, Byuduin couldn't believe what had just happened. While he was still in shock, Takeru started checking around and suddenly realized someone was watching them from afar. It seems that the villain in this story has decided not to let Takeru get out of hand anymore. No matter what happens, they will do everything to capture Takeru, who are considered abnormal. Even though he was stronger than an S-rank hunter, Takeru was still human, and certainly had his own weaknesses. The question is, how did they find out that Takeru was the one who defeated not only Cyclops but also the Minotaur? We will know the answer soon, sooner or later. Quickly, summer vacation is approaching, and Takeru wakes up from a nightmare about his past. When he felt difficulty breathing, he suddenly thought that he had returned to that world. But fortunately, he is still here because he still has to go to school. He hurriedly prepared and went down to have breakfast with his family. While eating, Takaru began to wonder about his plans for the upcoming summer vacation. He asked Duan to arrange a meeting with Wasugi during summer vacation, and Duan promised to do it. Takaru hopes to find clues on how to return this body to its true owner. But as he thought about it, Takaru began to wonder if the original master returned, would he disappear forever? Although this may be a heavy thing for others, Takaru doesn't care much anymore, because he has already died once. Now all he wants is peace. His thoughts were interrupted when his worried parents asked if he was okay, because his face looked very pale. To avoid worrying his parents, Takaru only said that he had a nightmare, and that it was nothing serious. However, it seems that his father is still not worried. Takaru's parents only knew that he had lost his memory, so they were worried that this could be a sign of another illness. They couldn't bear anything more bad happening to their son. Seeing his parents so worried made Takaru smile, because the love his parents gave him was truly unconditional. Therefore, Takaru is even more determined to return this body to its true owner as soon as possible. However, his parents did not allow him to go to school without first getting a health check. Instead of going to class, Takaru was excused from school to go see a doctor at the hospital. There, he unexpectedly met the hunters from the Wind Guard group. They were also shocked to see Takeru, not expecting that they would meet again. It turns out that the Wind Guard group was also sent here for treatment, and now they have been allowed to return home. When he saw Chika, Takaru wondered if she really didn't say anything about him to the others. Chika's expression was filled with tension, to the point where she couldn't stop fidgeting, making Takaru guess that she was keeping it a secret. The atmosphere became awkward, and Chika broke the silence by happily saying that she was happy that everyone was okay. To avoid further questioning, she quickly left. Meanwhile, Gato reveals that he already knows that Takeru was the one who saved Chika that day. He also shares that he is from Kazumi City, and their group always wants to protect the city at all costs. They had been together since childhood, and the fact that it ended like that made Gato angry. However, that also became his motivation to become stronger, and he promised that next time he would be the one to save the city and Chika. Instead of admitting he was the one who saved Chika, Takaru pretended to be confused, and Gato immediately understood the reason. However, Gato reminds Takaru that if he gets into trouble, he can always rely on him and the team. Before leaving, Gato thanks Takaru because without him, they wouldn't have been able to see Chika again. After a few minutes, Takaru's parents also said goodbye because they needed to go back to work. Takaru reassured them that he would be fine, there was no need to worry, and that he would go home to rest. On the way home, Takeru noticed that many people around him became too kind to him, expressing gratitude or concern, even though they did not tell him directly. Takaru felt wrong accepting everyone's concern, because he was not the true owner of this body. Furthermore, he also felt a sense of insecurity. That's why, until the true owner of his body returns, he will do his best to protect those around him. Even though he can't do much right now, Takaru hopes summer vacation comes soon so he can do something about this situation. Unexpectedly, some hunters heard what he said. But instead of communicating with them, Takaru chose to ignore them. However, these two hunters are quite persistent. They introduce themselves as Yashio and To, belong to the A-rank army of Ouroboros, an S-rank guild. They were sent here by order of their leader. While thinking about this, Takeru remembered that Sakura had mentioned a group called Ouroboros, and that this group was learning about him. Although this guild is prominent throughout Japan, there are many bad rumors surrounding it, so Takeru decided to follow Sakura's advice, trying to stay away from them. But when these two showed him a photo that hinted that they would do anything just to have a conversation with him, Takaru realized that if he didn't cooperate, he might get many others into trouble. Finally, he agreed to meet them at a restaurant. There, two hunters presented some documents that confused Takaru. It turned out that these were the conditions they set for this meeting. When Takaru examined the conditions offered by Ouroboros, they were truly enticing. They offered him an executive position with an annual salary of 50 million yen and many other incentives. In his heart, Takaru thought that if he met these people from the beginning, he would probably hate all hunters. But he felt lucky to have met Sakura first, because he had no intention of joining this guild. Takaru quickly declined the offer, explaining that he did not want to become a hunter. Yashio and To, despite not wanting to, decided to use force to force him to agree. Takaru calmly reminded them that this act was quite violent, but both were still determined to attack. Although their weapons were very modern, Takaru's skills were no less. Even so, the two still did not give up. They even declared that they would be lenient in not killing him. However, Takaru has very good reflexes, easily dodging all of their attacks. Yashio decided to find a way to stop Takaru's movements and deceive him. But even though they joined forces to attack, Takeru is still strong, almost on the level of an Estherin hunter. Using the guard card skill, Takaru always avoids all attacks from Yashio and To. Even though they continuously threw punches and kicks, they couldn't touch him. In the end, both were exhausted. In his heart, Takeru realized that these two people did not hesitate to use their anti-monster skills in public, because they were desperate to win. Yashio threatens Takeru, saying that if their strength does not produce the desired results, they will turn to hostage tactics. But what surprised Takeru was that they were the wrong person. It turns out, the person they were following all this time was not Takeru, but Araki. However, things have gone too far, and the situation has become much more complicated. When Yashio fell down, someone called him. Out of curiosity, Takeru picked up the phone. The man on the other end of the line was Yashio and To's boss, and he praised Takeru's incredible strength. He got straight to the point, wanting Takeru to join his team. However, if Takeru refused this offer, then he would have no choice but to provide his identity to the Hunter Association. He didn't want to do that. After all, he wanted to make Takeru his secret pawn and not let anyone else know about his presence. Knowing that Takeru did not agree, he immediately sent him a photo. In the photo are Takeru's parents lying on the hospital bed. Takeru panicked and worried about his parents' condition, but his boss reassured him not to be too angry. He simply gave them a special poison that could not be treated with any medicine in the world. The only thing that can save Takeru's parents is if the leader gives him the antidote. But, as expected, this only happened if Takeru agreed to his condition. In order to negotiate, the leader asked Takeru to come to him alone, which Takeru completely understood. He knew that bringing support would only make things more complicated. After checking on the condition of his parents, who were now in the hospital, Takeru immediately went to the leader's place. As soon as he arrived, Echidna, his assistant, led Takeru to the meeting room. Along the way, Echidna explains that these restaurants are used as their bases throughout Japan. And the place Takeru had been to before was also one of them. Takeru thought the meeting would take place in a normal room, but that was not the case. Upon entering an empty room, Hakun, another employee, announced that the leader was waiting for Takeru on the other side of what looked like a black hole. Without hesitation, Takeru entered and was greeted by a group of monsters. These creatures are all controlled by their leader, and no matter what orders he gives, they will surely follow. At this time, Takeru finally realized that all the evil that had happened in the city in the past few days was behind this leader. Surprisingly, he did not deny it. On the contrary, he calmly admitted that it was just a test. Additionally, he laughed that Gato kept crying after the incident, and that's why he couldn't stop doing it over and over again. Takeru's blood began to boil, and anger and confusion began to rise within him. Takeru asked directly if everything this leader did was his goal from the beginning. Without hesitation, the leader asserted that he was doing all he could to break all existing rules, along with the guild and the hunters who followed them. His goal is to take them down once and for all, and then rule the country along with the monsters. Takeru thinks this is impossible, because no matter how many monsters are brought into this situation, everything will still be controlled. However, with the leader, things are different. It seemed he had calculated all the consequences. Even with the intervention from the S-rank hunters, he still had other secret cards in hand. What was surprising was that the leader suddenly gave Takeru the antidote, shocking him. He said that he planned to give it to Takeru after showing him the situation clearly, as he had no intention of making Takeru an enemy. However, Takeru doesn't believe that, especially after the leader kidnapped his parents. Instead of discussing the matter, the leader continued to express that he understood Takeru's feelings about having to hide his power. He thinks it is unfair that people like Takeru have to live in repression for many years, always being imposed and controlled by the public. He asked Takeru why he had to keep this power, and he believed that Takeru really wanted to use it freely. The leader wanted to reach out to help him, to conquer the world with his strength. Without hesitation, Takeru threw the antidote to the ground and strongly declared that he rejected the leader's offer. It turns out, Takeru discovered that the poison the leader used was basilisk venom, and he cured his parents himself in advance. This surprised the leader, because this poison had never appeared in this world, and he could not understand how Takeru knew about its existence. Takeru frankly asked the leader to confront him directly, because he had come here with the intention of taking him down. Takeru believes that his power only exists to protect peaceful days. And if anyone dared to violate what was precious to him, he would not hesitate to crush them. This excited the leader, because he knew he was also very strong, and without hesitation rushed into the fight. Using his power, the leader ordered the monsters to attack Takeru at the same time. With Flare Burst, Takeru burned everything in a single blow. But this did not stop the leader. Instead, he grew more determined, hoping to exhaust Takeru's power. He continued to show off his skills in summoning monsters and forcing them to obey with magic. Takeru quickly realized that this was no ordinary person, but was likely an S-rank hunter, so he couldn't hold back. Takeru continuously launched powerful attacks, causing the leader to admit that Takeru was truly a talented anomaly. His attacks are more showy than most others. Upon realizing that Takeru is a tough opponent, the leader calls his assistant, Echidna, to deploy their secret card. With Echidna's signal, the leader summoned the terrible monster he had hidden, Hydrum, an 8-headed monster. Takeru was a bit overwhelmed, as this was the first time he had seen such a monster and it was hard to believe that this thing could exist in this world. When Takeru attacked the Hydra, the monster showed no pain, making him think that it was immune to pain. But as he continued to attack, Takeru realized that each head of the Hydra felt pain separately. However, the most challenging thing is that Hydra can regenerate. As an immortal monster, no hunter can easily defeat it. However, Takeru does not believe in immortality, as he has faced similar enemies. Everything will be okay because you will definitely find a way to turn this difficult situation around. From his observations, Takeru realized that for each part that was injured, the monster would regenerate that position. So if he attacked the monster's entire body at once, he could defeat it. However, Hydra is smarter than Takeru thought, and it is trying to prevent him from concentrating his mana to deliver the final blow. Takeru found Hydra preventing him from concentrating his mana annoying. So to win, you need to pay attention to every detail. After cutting off the Hydra's heads, Takeru tried to freeze them and found that it took about 3 seconds for them to regenerate. Takeru planned a quick magical attack during this short period of time. However, he felt that wasn't enough, so he continued to search for more of the monster's weaknesses. After a few seconds, Takeru discovered that Hydra's weak point was its tail. Using his powers, he attacked and defeated Hydra in one blow. Having his trump card defeated right before his eyes made the leader unbelievable, but that didn't mean he gave up. Even though he tried to counterattack by summoning other deadly monsters, Takeru was still stronger and continued to defeat them. He continued to summon other monsters to attack Takeru. But they all have one result, which is to be destroyed at Takeru's hands. While the leader was having difficulty, Echidna decided to join the battle. At first, Takeru thought that Echidna was just an ordinary monster that he could defeat easily. But he quickly discovered the truth. Echidna was a devil, much stronger than he thought. Takeru's knowledge of demons surprised Echidna, because she did not expect that someone from this world knew of their existence. This even causes Echidna to begin to believe that Takeru might be the person mentioned in the prophecy. Meanwhile, Takeru remained unmoved, as he remembered his days in the other world, where he was always told to kill demons at all costs. Seeing Takeru in this calm state made Echidna feel scared. As if she were facing the Demon King, Echidna began to wonder what she should do next. Unexpectedly, the leader allowed her to do whatever she wanted, because everything he had was now lost. All the monsters, including the Hydra, were dead, and he had no mana left. The leader thought it was better to leave things in Echidna's hands. This left her with no other choice but to carry out her plan, which she intended after eliminating all the hunters. Hearing this, the leader was a bit surprised, because it meant that Echidna also intended to overthrow him. But now he couldn't do much. He could only try to stop Takeru from moving, to buy time for Echidna to carry out her plan. Meanwhile, Echidna begins to carry out her plan. Since there was a space wall separating the two worlds, a small opening like a gate couldn't cause much damage. But what will happen if this space wall is broken? That's why Echidna created her child, which she called Typhos, a creature that she believed could kill even the gods. While everything was going on, a rift suddenly appeared, connecting the two worlds. People living normal lives began to panic when a series of gates suddenly appeared everywhere. Echidna also felt the change within herself, and it was only a matter of time to know if things would go according to her plan, or if Takeru would win this war. When Echidna started to rebel, Takeru must prepare to deal with it, because Echidna is not an easy opponent to defeat. But before we dive into this war, we need to go back to when it all started. 10 years ago, when boss Hebikawa was 13 years old and entered a gate for the first time. Even though carrying everyone's bags was quite heavy, Hebikawa still kept his spirits up, because he knew that he was well taken care of by his senior. At least, that's what he thought, until the situation changed. When being chased by monsters, his seniors left him behind. Just saying, since you entered the gate at such a young age, you must be strong enough to take care of yourself. At that time, the boy thought it was the end for him. But things didn't end as he thought. Echidna, the demon that had been chasing them, saw Hebikawa left behind and felt surprised. She decides to save him, but on the condition that there is a secret agreement between just the two of them. After that horrifying event, when he finally returned to the hospital, Hebikawa poured out all his fear and fatigue, asking his teammates why they used him as bait. What's worse is that they will not be punished. His teammates gave the organization a reason that it was not intentional, but just an accident. When one member of their group dies, the other begins to make Hebikawa feel guilty for speaking up. Since his testimony could not be confirmed, no one could do anything further. These are the rules of the association. In the end, Hibikawa accepted the deal with Echidna. Hibikawa is determined to destroy the Hunter Association, as long as Echidna gives him power. He promised to devote all his strength to ensure victory. At this point, when he and Echidna were halfway there, Hibikawa felt more relieved, until he realized that Takeru was still alive and well. But that doesn't mean Takeru didn't face difficulties. In fact, he couldn't deny that Echidna was extremely powerful, and it seemed like no power had any effect on her. Knowing that he needed to find Echidna's weakness to have a chance at victory, Takeru must dodge each attack as much as possible. While fighting, Echidna revealed that she and her child Typhos had merged and become the strongest beings in existence. She is confident that no one can ignore her. Takeru realized his body was gradually running out of strength, and if he didn't end the match soon, he might be defeated. However, this did not cause Takeru to give up. Although Echidna believed that all his attacks would not be able to hurt her, Takeru used aerial burst to cut off her head in one blow. Takeru discovered Echidna's weakness. Since she was controlling the Hydra monster, handling her became easier. However, Echidna did not yield. Her mind begins to erode, and she can no longer control Typhos's power. In desperation, she threatens Takeru, declaring that she will hunt down his family and all his loved ones. Echidna's threat was a last-ditch effort to turn the tide, but Takeru knew that this war was slowly drawing to a close. Takeru doesn't want anyone, especially his family, to get caught up in this trouble. He just looked at Echidna with angry eyes. This made Echidna suddenly feel a fear she thought she would never feel again. She began to wonder, if she had such terrible power, why was she still afraid of a child like Takeru? This fear makes her remember the painful days when her family despised and belittled her. Tears began to roll down her cheeks, but Echidna tried to control herself, because she knew that this weakness only existed in her mind. She was weak in the past, but now things are different. She wanted revenge on everyone who mocked her, wanted them to feel despair. To do that, she must kill Takeru, who she believes is the figure in the prophecy everyone is looking for, even if it costs her her life. Meanwhile, Takeru also begins to remember the moments when he lived in another world. One time, he and Edelweiss rested in the forest, and Edelweiss excitedly told him that this trip had many people participating, which made her believe that the trip would be great. However, Edelweiss still wondered whether turning down the offer to join another group to defeat the Demon King immediately was the right decision, even though everyone had asked them to join. Enter. Takeru continues saying that anyone has the right to refuse, as this mission is extremely dangerous. He also thought that no one would be able to keep up with his speed. Edelweiss completely agrees. If her memory was correct, there was a time Takeru left his horse behind and suddenly ran, and there was even a time he decided to climb a cliff. Therefore, no one can keep up with his speed. Additionally, Edelweiss knows that Takeru does not trust everyone, even when they praise his strength. Takeru seemed to feel more comfortable being alone. However, even though he denies it, Takeru actually enjoys Edelweiss's presence by his side, as she always takes care of him when things don't go as expected. Thanks to Edelweiss, Takeru's wounds are always healed promptly. That's why no matter what happens, Takeru won't let current events slow him down. Even though he had only explored a small part of Typhos, that didn't mean he was going to give up. Now that Takeru knew the true location of Echidna's body, all that remained was to destroy her with all his strength. However, his body was gradually losing energy, and Takeru knew that time was running out. He needed to end this war quickly, before he exhausted himself. Takeru began to feel his body becoming sluggish, and Echidna quickly noticed it. Although Takeru knew that handling Echidna might be simple, his body had reached its limit, and he could not continuously use powerful magic like before. However, this did not worry him, because he knew that Yasenyong, Typhos Rinmudalmua was also draining Echidna's life force, making her condition just as bad. Takeru realized something important. Typhos not only drained the life force of Echidna, but also of the people in this world. Typhos's followers have overrun Japan, and no matter what Takeru does, everything will likely end in death. But instead of giving up, Takeru thought that if that was true, he needed to quickly return to the other world. However, a question troubled him. Would he still have enough strength to move after killing Echidna? At this moment, Takeru didn't know what else to do. Echidna is also aware that if Takeru kills her, Typhos will lose complete control. Perhaps this was the reason she believed that Takeru would not kill her. But she was wrong. Takeru showed no signs of giving up. His determination to fight remained steadfast. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, Japan, Typhos's followers have begun causing chaos. Takeru knows that time is running out, and his decision could determine the fate of both worlds. while the guilds are making every effort to control the situation. Gato and his teammates are trying to stay optimistic amid difficult times, to avoid causing panic among everyone. Hunters from Morin Academy also joined the fight, continuously chanting Sakura's name. Show pride in their role models. They claim that they exist to protect peace and people from vicious monsters. Byuduin is confident until a monster catches him, causing his teammates to panic. Luckily, Sakura arrived just in time before things got worse. Even though Byuduin looked like an S-rank hunter, he knew that S-rank was still a distant dream. Meanwhile, Sakura seemed to go from place to place, making sure everything was under control. After completing her mission in the downtown area, she continued to another place. Everyone couldn't believe that Sakura possessed such great power. In Sakura's mind, nothing can stop her, and she will defeat anything that comes close. On the other side, Takeru is also trying his best not to be defeated. Even Echidna was surprised by his strength, as her army was destroyed little by little. In the midst of this intense match, Takeru suddenly remembered what Edelweiss had asked him before. It turns out, the reason why he couldn't trust his previous teammates was because he was self-aware that his strength was superior to theirs, making him gradually separate before they had a chance to do so. Takeru learned lessons from the past and shared this with Hebikawa. He explains that most people will not become strong. But if you look around properly, you will find people who are not like that. Takeru is grateful to have people like Edelweiss and Hebikawa, helping him realize that he doesn't have to fight alone. As things gradually spiral out of Echidna's control, she decides to sacrifice herself to end it all. However, no matter how much she sacrifices, Takeru always wins. He grasped the entire situation, something Echidna did not expect. The dimensional wall was suddenly gone, and Echidna was stunned to realize that not only had Typhos been killed, but Typhos' entire existence had been erased. She understands that Takeru's power is far beyond human capabilities. As Takeru walked towards Echidna, she couldn't help but feel scared. It seemed Takeru wanted to ask her something before finishing her off. Immediately, he asked about the prophecy she mentioned. Echidna, struggling to respond, Echidna tries to explain that the prophecy involves a power like Takeru's. But before she could say more, her wounds stopped healing, signaling that she was slowly dying. This scene pained Hebikawa, because after all these years, they were close partners, and letting go of such a relationship is not easy. In that moment, Hebikawa reminisced about the good and difficult times he had experienced with Echidna. It felt like this was a punishment for him to see her go. But instead of showing pain, Echidna tried to keep a happy face so that Hebikawa wouldn't feel too burdened. Even so, Hebikawa's heart was broken, and he could no longer control his anger. He is determined to kill Takeru at all costs. However, before Hebikawa can act, a group of strangers appear, shocking Takeru. He didn't expect anyone else to show up. With a calm tone, Takeru asked who they were. Without hesitation, those three people introduced themselves as Ryer, Sukuna, and the Dark Knight. With just a glance, Takeru knew that these people were very strong, because they did not waver in his presence. He was also aware that if he continued to fight, his body would not be able to endure it anymore. These three people quickly assured Takeru that they had no intention of doing anything wrong, and that he did not need to be so wary. They explained that their purpose is only to deal with the traitor, that is, Echidna, and they have no intention of confronting Takeru. They also said they came to retrieve something they called trade secrets. Once they had what they needed, they immediately prepared to leave. However, Takeru did not let them leave so easily. Ryer, one of the three, advised Takeru to relax, knowing he was exhausted. He reassures them that they will definitely meet again in the near future, so there is no need to rush. This makes Takeru wonder if this is another world he once knew, but he also realized that it wasn't. Meanwhile, in the city, many people have died and the damage from this outbreak is unprecedented. The person behind the incident was quickly arrested by the Hunter Association, and everyone seemed to be at peace. However, Hebikawa did not resist, perhaps because he finally felt guilty about what he had done. On the way to be escorted to the police station, Hebikawa quietly contemplated what Takeru had told him earlier. In his mind, he looked back at the association and realized that they had never been on the side of true justice. He believes he doesn't have much time left. However, Hebikawa's teammates came to rescue him. A bomb from one of Hebikawa's men hit the police car, and they quickly reached their leader within seconds. Before attacking, Hebikawa reminds everyone that only those willing to die should follow, as they will end it all this time. Meanwhile, at Kazami Hospital, Takeru's parents have recovered and are preparing to go home. Outside the hospital, Takeru feels the heat of the sun, signaling the approaching summer vacation. Elsewhere, three demons just returned home and immediately reported to the princess that they had finished dealing with Echidna, the traitor, as she had ordered. Additionally, they also recovered the stolen item, Pandora. But that's not the most interesting part. Maria announced that they had spared someone they believed to be a figure in the Messiah's prophecy. The princess seemed satisfied with this decision, because she thinks it's not the right time yet. Sukuna, on the other hand, got angry, because she really wanted to confront Takeru. However, since the situation is still not safe for them, they decide to leave Takeru alone for the time being. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of the Japanese Hunter Association, the leaders were meeting to discuss recent events. The S-rank hunter, Sogo Renya, announced that he had summoned all 50 S-rank hunters to an emergency meeting, but only 5 came, much to his surprise. He wondered if the remaining hunters cared about Japan's fate, with everything spiraling out of control. Sakura reminded that since those present had responded to the summons, no one else should be mentioned. Karen also agreed, saying that gathering people to the scene in this era is outdated. The association's leaders immediately objected, pointing out that because they had to discuss confidential issues, the gathering was necessary. Instead of agreeing, Karen even teased the leader, making Sogo feel angrier. Since the Hunter Association is run by the government, using tax money to go to luxury motels or hotels is unacceptable. Surely if hunters use tax money for luxury, they would immediately be fired. However, for Karen, no matter what the government says, it is the hunters who are protecting the people. This did not please Sogo at all, because he sided with the government. Meanwhile, some other hunters tried to ease the tense atmosphere. S-rank hunter Igarashi Hideo teased hunter Hayabusa Tenku by pairing him with Karen, making Tenku blush because he didn't expect to be put in such an awkward situation. However, it seems that Karen is not the type of person Tenku is looking for. A kind man, willing to do anything for others, including the weak, is not Karen's ideal model. Hearing this made Tenku feel disappointed, because he had basically just been rejected and hadn't even confessed yet. Noticing that Tenku is sad, Hideo tries to comfort him, saying that his destined mate is surely waiting somewhere. While the situation was chaotic, Akahoshi Mayoi, president of the Hunter Association, appeared, causing everyone to suddenly change their attitudes. This surprised Sogo, and the meeting was immediately started. The first issue they discussed was the terrorist attack led by Hebikawa. The chairman announced that through the investigation, they have confirmed the involvement of demons in this incident. This information confused the hunters, as they had never heard of demons before. The chairman went on to explain that demons were beings that existed outside the gates, which could be called people from another world. Some hunters like Tenku knew there were signs of civilization inside the gates, but he began to wonder if everything inside was already ruins. However, Hideo thinks it's reasonable that they don't know about this, since these demons only appeared once more than 20 years ago. They were able to defeat him and never appeared again. To be more precise, demons only appear like humans because they are ruthless monsters. Based on what Hideo said, establishing relations with demons would be impossible. However, if they announce this to everyone, there will be people who disagree with them. Besides, there will also be people who try to meet these demons. Surely since they couldn't predict how things would turn out, they planned to hide the existence of demons for now. And that's why the truth will only be revealed to S-rank hunters and a system will be established. That's why they need to participate in this cover-up as much as possible. Hearing all this makes Sakura wonder if her mother and father were killed by a demon, not a humanoid monster. As she was about to ask more about it, the chairman continued to discuss the next topic, which was Takeru seeing his photo on the big screen, which made Sakura feel shivers. She didn't expect that the association knew about it, but it seemed the president had his own way. According to the chairman, Takeru destroyed the Ouroboros Guild himself. This makes Tenku wonder, because according to the reports they received, Hebikawa was captured by the association's hunters, so how could Takeru defeat them all alone? One of the officers explained that when they arrived at the scene, Hebikawa was already knocked down. They checked the security cameras and discovered Takeru. Since he was not part of the Hunter Association, they were investigating who he was. The chairman requested that if anyone has any information about Takeru, please collect it. However, throughout the meeting, no one shared any information, making the chairman suddenly smile. It turns out that the chairman only summoned 4 people, not the entire organization, and Sogo was an accomplice in this plan. So he asked Sogo to keep it a secret, as there were still other plans being made. Now it's only a matter of time before we find out if the president has something up his sleeve, and if so, what it is. Meanwhile, Sakura is extremely confused. She didn't expect Takeru's name to appear in such a big event. Even though she tried to keep everything a secret, nothing seemed to work. Even though she did a lot for Takeru, it seemed like Takeru himself was too careless. At this moment, Sakura was really confused about whether Takeru really wanted to stay hidden or not. However, she believed that Takeru had his own reasons, and so, she decided to talk to him about this. Without hesitation, she immediately sent a message to Takeru, telling him to contact her when he read the message. Suddenly, the president walked in, reassuring Sakura that there was no need to worry. The chairman seems to know the truth that the cause of the incident involving Ouroboros was because they poisoned Takeru's parents. Therefore, the Hunter Association has no plans to do anything about Takeru. However, for now, the chairman wants Sogo and the rest to resolve the matter as soon as possible and only wants Sakura to know about this, since she is Takeru's friend. Hearing this, Sakura was extremely shocked, because she did not expect the president to know so much. Instead of wondering how the president knew this, Sakura began to wonder if she was really Takeru's friend. Because in her opinion, they were not that close. Just as the president left, a girl named Momiji Anita appeared, looking cute, and announced that their grandfather was waiting. Unexpectedly, Momiji burst into tears, as this was the first time Sakura's work calmed down, allowing them to spend time together after a long time. To make it up to Momiji, Sakura promises to do whatever Momiji wants, no matter what. Hearing that, Momiji became very happy and immediately showed Sakura what she wanted, making Sakura surprised. The next day, Takeru decided to go to the shopping mall because he needed to buy some things. When he arrived, he was extremely shocked to see the mall crowded, but this was not unexpected because summer vacation had arrived. Even though he didn't want to go, Takeru still had to come because there were many things to buy. Even though it had only been a week since the incident, the government had quickly restored the buildings, causing Takeru to guess that this might be thanks to the specialized recovery department under the Hunter Association. But instead of worrying about that right now, he felt happy to finally buy a new phone, since his old one was broken in the battle with Typhos. While on his way home, Takeru ran into Momiji and Sakura. It seemed like the two sisters were also going shopping. Although Takeru greeted Sakura with a bright smile, she seemed unhappy, thinking about Takeru not responding to her text message the day before. Sakura's angry face appeared, making Takeru start to feel a little scared. Without hesitation, he explained everything to her, from the fact that his phone was broken to the fact that he had just bought a new one. Meanwhile, Momiji just watched her sister. Based on what she remembered from her grandmother's words, Momiji couldn't help but think that Sakura might be in love with Takeru, seeing her sister angry at being ignored by Takeru. Without hesitation, Momiji directly asked Sakura if Takeru was her boyfriend. At first, Sakura was a bit embarrassed when she heard this, but since she had been wondering since yesterday whether Takeru considered her a friend, she decided to agree with Momiji's words, affirming that they were indeed friends. Sakura thought that Takeru would feel embarrassed hearing this, but surprisingly, he seemed happy and honored to be friends with the most famous person in school. Because Momiji wants to know more about Sakura's life at school, she invites Takeru to go shopping with them. Although both were surprised, Takeru did not refuse but accepted Momiji's invitation. In the end, the three went shopping all day. While the Windguard group was having lunch at a restaurant, they suddenly saw Takeru with Sakura and Momiji. Seeing Takeru and Sakura together shocked them. And they start to think that maybe Takeru and Sakura are dating. While some members of the group seemed amused by this scene, the leader of the group looked quite serious. Returning to Takeru and Sakura, because they were still confused from before, Momiji went on a ride on the merry-go-round. Sakura, realizing something is wrong, tells Takeru not to lie about being liked by everyone at school. Although a bit scared to answer Sakura, Takeru frankly replied that it wasn't necessarily a lie. Hearing that, Sakura realized that Takeru was not a bad person. No matter what others said, she knew Takeru was only fighting for the safety of his parents. Even though the chairman said he was investigating Takeru, Sakura felt like he knew him before that incident. She began to wonder why this was so. And questions like who is Takeru really, or does he have amnesia, began to appear in Sakura's mind. Even though they said they were friends, she still thought she didn't know much about him. Their serious conversation was interrupted when the game Momiji was participating in suddenly stopped, and she disappeared. Immediately, the two got worried and started looking for her. But what they don't know is that from Momiji's perspective, she intentionally hides so that Takeru and Sakura have time to confess their love to each other. While hiding, Momiji suddenly saw a boy crying because he lost his parents. Without hesitation, the girl approached and said she would help the boy find his parents. Not long after, a gate break suddenly appeared. Panic spread everywhere. Momiji quickly held the boy's hand and ran away as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Takeru and Sakura became more worried than ever because Momiji was nowhere to be found. As they search for her, everyone in the park feels relieved to see Sakura, as there is now hope that they will be saved. Without hesitation, they asked Sakura to quickly handle the situation. But because she couldn't see her sister, Sakura couldn't concentrate and couldn't seem to talk at the moment. Takeru immediately spoke up for her. He asked everyone if anyone had seen Sakura's sister, and described it in detail. Momiji is a 5-year-old girl, wearing the same dress as her older sister and a bow on her head. Based on this information, some people remembered that they had seen Momiji somewhere. Upon hearing this, Sakura immediately knew that her sister had gone towards the gate break. She didn't waste a minute, immediately ran there to check the situation. Meanwhile, Momiji tried to stay as calm as possible, because she knew that the boy next to her was very scared. In her mind, Momiji reassured the boy that there was nothing to worry about, because her older sister, Sakura, would definitely handle everything. But the situation is much more difficult than Momiji had expected, as a monster is moving towards them, ready to kill them both. As for Sakura, she was running towards Momiji. Remember the time their parents sacrificed to save them. This gives her more motivation. Because she knew that if she lost Momiji, she would never forgive herself. At that moment, the two saw Momiji in an alley, and the monster was about to attack her. Before it could do anything, Takeru rushed in and knocked it down in one blow. After solving everything and saving everyone, Takeru and Sakura ended a difficult day. In addition, Sakura also found the lost boy's parents, which made everyone very happy. Before they said goodbye, Sakura apologized to Takeru for not being able to keep calm even though she was a hunter, forcing him to use his powers. Takeru, although a bit shy, reassured her that there was nothing to worry about, since she always took care of him. Maybe it was time he did something to help her. Hearing that, Sakura felt a little relieved. Meanwhile, Momiji also thanks Takeru for his help. Without him, the girl could have died. Takeru took this opportunity to remind Momiji that next time, don't get lost on your own like that, because Sakura will worry again. However, Takeru couldn't deny that it was wonderful to see Momiji protecting the boy without flinching. Hearing that, Momiji was very happy, because this was the first time she was praised. Meanwhile, Sakura was still deep in thought, wondering how Takeru knew those fighting moves just now, which only belonged to those who had gone through many battles. Without hesitation, she asked directly who he was, because she didn't want to doubt anymore, and she wanted to know the truth right now. Feeling a bit guilty for not telling himself clearly, Takeru prepared to tell Sakura everything from now on. However, before he can do that, Momiji interjects into their conversation, asking the two to get along. After watching many dramas, Momiji suggested that to reconcile, they should kiss, like what actors usually do. This innocent suggestion made Sakura laugh. After a long day, Sakura asked Takeru if he wanted to walk home with them, and without hesitation, Takeru agreed. On the way back, Takeru realized that Sakura and Momiji were very close, something he was somewhat jealous of. However, Sakura felt that because of this she spoiled Momiji a lot, but that didn't bother her at all, because Momiji was her only treasure right now. No matter what happens, she will make sure her sister has the best life. Sakura also shared that their parents were killed when Momiji was very young, so she didn't really know the feeling of her parents' love. Because Sakura was very weak as a child, Momiji grew up lonely, which made Sakura feel regretful. That's why Sakura decided to become strong and become a hunter, for a very personal reason. In her mind, if she was strong, she could protect the people she loved, so Momiji wouldn't have to cry anymore. But not only that, she also hopes that it will lead to a world where everyone can laugh freely. Although she knew this seemed like a pipe dream, for her, it was not a passing thought. Additionally, Takeru also decided to tell Sakura something he thought he might not have the chance to say next time. With a big smile, he expressed that he was very happy to have met her, because she had allowed him to experience things beyond his imagination. He also shared that his memories may be slowly returning, and there is a possibility that the memories he has created in this short time may disappear. This confused Sakura, because it didn't make sense at all. Takeru continued to explain that it was because he was not the real Takeru. However, Sakura didn't seem to understand what he meant. She simply said that, even if he forgot her, she would still remember him as her friend. The next day, as Takeru planned to meet Uesugi Kikyu, he and Byudoin were currently on their way to Niigata. But it seemed Takeru didn't like Byudoin's company at all. Meanwhile, at the sacred mountain range Yomotsudake, Uesugi appeared. Upon arriving at the village, the two immediately started climbing the mountain. And Takeru was quite surprised that his body felt relieved, even after climbing the mountain for many hours. It seemed that this forest had a dense amount of mana circulating, something Takeru noticed for himself. According to Byudoin, these mountains are an ideal place to build a shelter thanks to the favorable source of that powerful energy. Usually temples, as this place connects to another world without going through a portal. There have been stories of yokai like Oni appearing here at some point. All of this comes from the dragon veins that exist in places like this, so everything here has the same origin. If he spoke frankly, Byuduan said that this place had all kinds of dangerous creatures, and was only known to S-rank hunters and a few special families. However, there's no need to worry, because if monsters invade, someone will take care of them. In Japan, exorcists are common, but the Wasugi clan is one of the clans that has protected the country since ancient times. However, Takaru wondered why Byuduan used the word once, when referring to them. It turns out that this family was destroyed 10 years ago by a monster that appeared in this area. That monster was sealed by Wasugi Tsubaki, Kikyu's older sister, but in the end she had to sacrifice her life to do so. This means that the only survivor is none other than Kikyu, and she has been protecting this seal the entire time. Therefore, her image appearing in a magazine is a rare moment. Now, when Byuduan mentioned it, Takaru had the feeling that Kikyu brought a sense of calm. However, Byuduan immediately disagreed, and when the two began to argue further, Kikyu suddenly appears, hitting Byuduan for talking bad about her behind her back. This made Takeru look at her from a different angle, when she was taking care of Byuduan and also cared for Takeru. Before starting the fight, she asked Takeru to show off his strength. And surprisingly, Takaru is not normal at all. If he were just an average hunter, Kikyu's first attack would have been enough to finish him. In addition, she was also quite surprised to see that Takaru's counterattacks were very good. From the way he stiffened his arms and waited for the opportunity to counterattack, Kikyu was sure that Takeru was used to battles. But she still thought he had no chance with her until she saw what Takeru could do. Before things went too far, Kikyu said enough was enough, because if they continued, this would pass the test, now that she had seen Takeru's potential. Kikyu started asking Takeru some questions to understand more, since Takeru was not a hunter. She wondered why he came here just to see her. Without hesitation, Takaru said that he wanted her to help him get rid of a spirit that was haunting him. He went on to explain that he had an accident that caused him to lose his memory and may have given him the ability to use his powers through possession. So he wanted to return to his normal self. Hearing that, Kikyu realized that Takeru was not normal at all. Because Kikyu suspected that Takeru wouldn't lie, after coming here, she only asked for confirmation. Does Takeru really want to get rid of the soul inside him? Because it seems like you really want it. Kikyu had no choice but to invite him back to her mansion so they could talk more. After a long day, Takaru felt a bit tired from the fight and the hospitality of Kikyu's family. To relax a bit, he went to bathe in a hot spring. Takaru suddenly felt a presence. And to my surprise, it was none other than Kikyu. Afraid for his life, Takaru tried to stay as quiet as possible until he heard Kikyu talking to herself, wondering why she was not good at communicating. It seemed like what happened between her and Takaru made her feel confused, so she told herself to try harder for the sake of the Wasugi clan. During those moments, Takaru glanced at her for a moment, wondering why Kikyu was different from before. Thanks to a small move, the S-class hunter noticed his presence. Without hesitation, she immediately launched a deadly attack, but as soon as she saw it was just Takeru, she immediately stopped, with her cheeks red with embarrassment. The next day, Takaru had expected that she would be angry with him, but to his surprise, she didn't seem to mind what happened. In fact, she even greeted Takaru, "Good morning," causing the boy to be so confused that he stammered. Sensing the awkward atmosphere, Kikyu immediately asked Takaru frankly if he was behaving like that because of what happened yesterday. In order not to make Kikyu misunderstand, Takaru apologized, making Kikyu laugh a bit, as she was just teasing him. She also assured him that it was her fault, so there was no need to worry. Since it's a new day, it's time for them to learn more about the spirit haunting Takaru. To investigate further, Kikyu asked Takeru to close his eyes and concentrate, listening to his heartbeat. Surprisingly, Takaru did better than she expected. With this intense concentration, it seemed that no sound could affect him. However, when thinking about Takaru's story, Kikyu realized immediately that he was lying from the beginning. As a member of the Wasugi clan, serving the gods, she has the ability to discern these things. His story felt implausible, but it didn't look like this kid was lying at all. So, to understand more clearly, Kikyu needs to take a close look inside his mind. As soon as she entered Takeru's mind, she couldn't deny that his mind looked calm and gentle, but she also felt a certain sadness. When she pushed in, Kikyu was shocked at what she saw. So as soon as she was out of Takeru's mind, she immediately knew that with that power, Takeru couldn't be just an ordinary citizen like he claimed. So no matter what happens, she desperately needs to find out who Takaru really is. Meanwhile, Takaru is feeling confused about what is going on, as it seems that Kikyu is actually trying to kill him. With no other choice, Takaru had to use protection to ensure he wouldn't be killed. Seeing Takeru strike, Kikyu concluded that Takeru was indeed the strongest hunter she had met so far. When things went too far, Takaru had no choice but to counterattack, because he couldn't hold back anymore. When swept away by Takeru's power, Kikyu suddenly stopped without resistance. Unexpectedly, her ribbon was lost during battle. Since it was a gift from her family, she couldn't lose it at any cost. Now that it's gone, she could only sob. Meanwhile, Takeru felt confused, wondering if it was his fault. So Takeru did everything he could, trying to calm her down, but it seemed like nothing worked. Meanwhile, somewhere near the seal, it seems like something bad is about to happen. 10 years ago, when the Wasugi family was alive, they reminded themselves that since the family had risked their lives to pave the way, they could not let that effort go to waste. This time is when they need to act for the benefit of everyone, no matter how difficult things are. The family appeared quite calm, knowing that Wasugi Tsubaki, the head of the family, was always there to protect them. They respected her with all their hearts, especially Kikyu, who was still so young at that time. Tsubaki is known as the caring older sister who does everything for her younger sister's benefit. So, on the last day they saw each other, Tsubaki hugged Kikyu tightly. "Assure me that no matter what happens, Kikyu can always rely on you." Tsubaki also said that although Kikyu was a bit clumsy with her words, but she was still proud that Kikyu was able to express her feelings. Tsubaki also thanked her for always worrying about them, and promised that she wouldn't die easily. She promised Kikyu that she would not die until she saw her sister in her wedding dress. But it seems everything has changed. Now Tsubaki is dead. All Kikyu has left are memories of them. Kikyu describes her sister as the light in the family, where everyone naturally gathers around. As for Kikyu, she is just a closed person. But with Tsubaki by her side, it gave Kikyu courage. However, on that day, the Wasugi family members went off to seal a rampaging monster and never returned home. It was true that Yomotsudake was a harsh place for ordinary people without guards, so the servants had to go down the mountain, and Kikyu still clearly remembered the dejected looks on their faces as they left her. The people who stayed behind began to look at her with the eyes of people who thought it would be better if she died instead of her sister. There was even a proposal for them all to go down the mountain together, but she couldn't say don't go or stay here, because she didn't have the power to protect everyone. As the last member of the Wasugi clan, Kikyu's responsibility is to protect the seal that everyone sacrificed to create. But whether she could do it didn't make her feel nervous. There was a time when she thought that if she became like her sister, everything would be okay. So she tried to act like Tsubaki. That's why with a hair tie on her head, she thought she could live happily all the time. Now that it was gone, she couldn't help but feel anxious, as if she couldn't face it alone, and she hated herself for being like that. Seeing Kikyu sad, Takeru comforted her by saying that he completely understood that feeling, because he used to be like that too. He was constantly bullied and wanted to change his life, but the thought of becoming a different person every day made him feel heavy. However, Kikyu seemed unable to believe this, because Takeru looked so strong, so she asked him how he changed and became the person he is now. With a bright smile, Takeru revealed his secret. It was because he had people around him who accepted him for who he was. No matter what, we meet wonderful people at unexpected times. After that short morning conversation, Byuduin noticed that Takeru was full of energy. Since he had fixed the dojo roof, they could start practicing at any time. But before doing anything else, Takeru tried to scold Byuduin for intentionally teasing Kikyu the other day. Byuduin's reason surprised Takeru a bit. It seemed that Byuduin did that on purpose, because he knew Kikyu was quite a lonely person, so she needed someone to easily cause trouble with. He is willing to be that person. Takeru didn't expect to hear this from him, but now he feels a bit guilty about what happened and plans to do something to make Kikyu feel better. However, it cannot be denied that finding a hair tie is not easy. Finally, Kikyu appeared, informing Takeru that when she entered his mind, she fought against an evil within him. So Takeru took the opportunity to ask Kikyu if she saw another soul in there. To my surprise, there seemed to be no soul at all. Kikyu also thinks that it is impossible for two souls to exist in one body. But this doesn't make sense at all, since it's known that Kikyu fought by letting a soul enter her. However, it seems that is not the case with Kikyu, as she only borrowed their power, so this technique is not a possession. In the case of a soul entering a body that already has another soul, the original soul will be pushed out. This makes Takeru wonder where the original owner's soul went. Suddenly, a fox appears, seemingly wanting Takeru to follow it. Unexpectedly, the fox found the hair tie he was looking for. Additionally, it seems the fox can also talk to Takeru. Since this wasn't Takeru's first time talking to animals, he asked the fox what he wanted him to do. Without hesitation, the fox said that he wanted Takeru to protect Kikyu at all costs. This confused Takeru, because he knew that even without asking for help, Kikyu was already quite strong. But remembering what Byuduin told him before, Takeru decided to accept the fox's request. However, before doing anything else, he also reminded Takeru to keep this a secret, because it might shock Kikyu a bit. Now that everything is ready, Takaru uses teleportation magic and returns to where Kikyo is. He immediately handed the hair tie back to her, and this made Kikyo tear up a bit. Meanwhile, somewhere Tsubaki is feeling happy knowing that Kikyo is no longer alone. Unexpectedly, it seemed like she was actually the fox from before. Although protecting her sister was her duty before, that is no longer possible. That's why, now everything is in Takaru's hands. If he makes her cry, she will definitely come to him, without hesitation. Since Kikyo clearly couldn't help him in this matter, Takaru decided to return home. However, he promised Kikyo he would text her if there was any progress. Before leaving, Kikyo reminded him that even if an evil spirit possessed him, it was only a matter of time. Before his body began trying to repel the foreign substance, another soul could not continue to overwhelm another soul for long. Therefore, Kikyo believes that Takeru is not someone who needs to be exorcised. On the way back down the mountain, he started thinking about what Kikyo had told him earlier. According to her, it's strange that Takeru's soul hasn't returned yet. Did it go somewhere else or was it destroyed? Whatever it is, it seems like everything is back to where it started. Now you need to think about what to do next. Suddenly, the ground began to shake, causing Takeru and Byuduin in the mansion to also panic. Surprisingly, Kikyo was very calm. She even asked Byuduin to get off the mountain as soon as possible. But because he insisted on staying to help, Kikyo had no choice but to push him down. Although he appreciated the concern, Kikyo thought that Byuduin would only cause trouble. After all, this is the Wasugi family's mission, so she must be the one to take care of it. After a while, Byuduin regained consciousness after being knocked down by Kikyo. He begged Anira, the guardian spirit of Kikyo, that her sister had given her, to return to Kikyo. But it seems that Anira has no intention of doing so. Because it's all Kikyo's orders. On the way, they come across Takeru. Seeing him covered in wounds, Takeru immediately bandaged her. Meanwhile, Byuduin seemed a bit shocked at the chaotic scene before his eyes. However, it's not the time to worry about that, because Takeru is already here. He asked Byuduin to take him back to Kikyo at all costs, but it seems Byuduin can't do anything anymore because Anira has decided to take him to safety. Meanwhile, Takeru began to remember what the fox had asked of him. Hearing Kikyo was in trouble, Takeru wondered if he should go back to the mansion now and help her himself. The fox suddenly appeared, seeing that Takeru needed a guide, so she came here to help. Meanwhile, Kikyo is deep in the mountain, waiting with an enchanting smile. Tsubaki greets her sister, whom she hasn't seen in a long time. She started complimenting Kikyo's hair, as it looked exactly like the hairstyle she had created earlier. Unexpectedly, Tsubaki here is not the person Kikyo used to know. This Tsubaki even teased Kikyo, saying that her sister had always lacked confidence. She also realized that Kikyo had been lonely for a long time, but there was no need to worry anymore, because from today, they would all be together. However, Kikyo doesn't want that to happen. She used her sword and began chanting the spell. Seeing Kikyo like that makes Tsubaki angry. She now confirms that Kikyo has no plans to accept her. Tsubaki had no choice but to defeat Kikyo's arrogant face. She warns that no matter how much Kikyo cries, she will not stop. However, this does not scare Kikyo, for she is a true Wasugi who will destroy opposing gods. She is the reincarnation of Bishamon and will ensure the destruction of this demon. Anyway, before she can hurt her sister any further, Takeru immediately ran towards where Kikyo was when he heard that Kikyo was in danger. Along the way, the fox began to feel tired because Takeru ran faster than her, even though she was supposed to be his guide. She tries to ask Takeru to stop because otherwise she won't have any meaning anymore. Furthermore, she was certain that Takeru probably didn't know where to go. Hearing that, Takeru stopped and reasoned that he thought it was okay to go in the direction of the mana source. Without hesitation, the fox said that was the reason Takeru was so boring. Before leaving, Takeru took the opportunity to ask the fox about the monster that was raging. In its origin, it is so powerful that it cannot be just a simple monster. The fox explains that to be specific, it is not really a monster, but Naraku. It was an entity that appeared in this world 1,000 years ago through the dragon veins, so it was basically like a powerful demon. Hearing that this was a demon didn't surprise Takeru at all, and this made the fox wonder how Takeru knew about them. Takeru explains that he doesn't know much about them, but he just knows that they exist. With that, the fox explained in detail that it had been passed down from generation to generation in the Wasugi family that a soul from a house in a parallel world was summoned into this world, and to be able to move in this world, it needs an object called Yorishiro. Naraku has the ability to interfere with the mind of any living creature. It used that power to make people think it controlled the weather and the mountains. The people feared it as a mountain god, but their family used a truly divine power to seal it. But for some reason, the seal was destroyed 10 years ago. According to the fox, it seemed that the seal had weakened over time and no longer had the same power as before, so they sealed it up. However, Even though it put the Uesugi family in a difficult situation, its power was truly too great for them to control. Hearing this makes Takeru realize that this fox is Kikyo's older sister, Tsubaki. Tsubaki continued to explain that her body had been taken over by that demon, so she was only in spirit form. But she knew clearly that as soon as Takeru saw her, she immediately realized that Takeru definitely knew who she was. Actually, it's because she doesn't have any darkness. However, Takeru begins to wonder why she chose her fox form instead of the other spirits. Although it sounds unbelievable, it seems that Tsubaki decided on this form because it looked cute from a human perspective, making Takeru laugh a bit. But beyond that, Tsubaki went on to explain that, since those of the Uesugi family held divine power, her body was a perfect vessel for the demon. Kikyo, on the other hand, has the highest potential, being the vessel for the strongest god. That's why it's no surprise that Naraku would definitely target Kikyo to become a god again. This reminds Takeru that demons are usually invincible. Even if one destroys the vessel that holds them, it does not harm them, because the soul is elsewhere. However, if the attack has divine power, then the soul will also be damaged. But even they with their power could only tie up its soul and seal it. Kikyo was trying to end the battle in one go, if so there was a chance of winning. Kikyo quickly demonstrated his strength to help her stand. Even though Naraku recognized Takeru's formidable strength, she was still not easily subdued. When Kikyo was almost done with the fight, Naraku suddenly acted as if he was sad, reminding Kikyo of her older sister. Those strong emotions caused Naraku to quickly take possession of Kikyo, showing that she has become proficient in manipulating the minds of her victims, using Tsubaki's memories as a weapon. When the situation becomes worse than expected, Takeru suddenly appears to save the day. It was the first time Naraku saw him, and she wondered who he was, but instead of introducing himself, Takeru immediately went to bandage Kikyo's wound first. Looking at her condition, it was clear that she was losing a lot of blood and needed to see a doctor immediately. However, instead of worrying about her health, Kikyo repeatedly apologized for not being able to destroy the monster and not fulfilling her promise to everyone. While this emotional scene plays out, Naraku cannot accept that Takeru is actually ignoring her, despite all the hardships he went through to get to this place. She couldn't help but ask who he was, then moved closer, asking if he was Kikyo's boyfriend, or if he wanted to be her friend. But before she could finish, Takeru immediately punched her, easily pushing her back several meters. Instead of worrying about the monster, Takeru was worried that with the speed of his magic, he wouldn't be able to heal Kikyo in time. Not long after, Tsubaki finally caught up, and seeing her sister in such a state made her worried. To help her sister a little, she decided to get her hair tie back. Because this is her gift to her sister, Tsubaki plans to use it as a means to channel her remaining vitality. But if she did, she wouldn't be able to stay here anymore. Before everything happened, Tsubaki reminded Takeru of their promise. Although Takeru is not good at fighting, in order to protect others, he is forced to do his best, because this monster has surpassed the limit, and Takeru had no choice but to destroy her right here. Watching Takeru fight, Tsubaki couldn't help but admit that he possessed great recovery power. Without him, saving Kikyo would have been impossible. Before things got worse, Tsubaki started saying everything she wanted to convey to her sister. She admitted that she was not a happy person from the beginning, but had moments of doubt in places Kikyo could not see. When their parents passed away from illness, Tsubaki became the head of the family, having to meet everyone's expectations. As a result, she had to bury her worries and try to appear as radiant as possible. That's why she was jealous of Kikyo, because her sister could express her emotions openly. Sometimes it gets a little dark, but if Kikyo knows that every time calling her Nasama helps Tsubaki calm down and feel not alone, then she will feel grateful. Kikyo is Tsubaki's most important and beloved family, and she never wants her sister to suffer alone. That's why she must save her brother at all costs. Meanwhile, it seems that Anira and Byuduin have reached the foot of the mountain. Because he couldn't help Kikyo, Byuduin had to leave everything to Anira to take care of. When Anira returned to the mountain, Byuduin requested that more support be sent to Niigata, Yomotsudake's area. Although he felt bad about not being able to do anything, he reminded himself not to misunderstand this, as he did not become a hunter to be recognized by someone. Like Kikyo, he will protect everyone in his own way. Returning to the two sisters, as Tsubaki heals her sister, Kikyo recalls that her sister is a wonderful person. Since childhood, Tsubaki has always been supportive and cheerful. That's why everyone loves her. When she passed away, Kikyo was devastated. Felt like everyone around her just hoped that it was she who died, not her sister. From a young age, Kikyo suffered from mental loneliness. She was weak inside, even though she knew clearly that things weren't like that. She hated herself for that, and wondered what she would be like if she were like her sister. If she had strength like Tsubaki, maybe things would be different. That's why Kikyo wants to become strong, because otherwise, she won't be able to compete. Now that she had done what she planned, she couldn't help but feel lonely. Tsubaki, on the other hand, feels proud of her sister, because Kikyo is grown up now. But it cannot be denied that Kikyo is still as whiny as before. Seeing her sister's image, Kikyo couldn't help but shed tears. Hugged Tsubaki. She confided that she had no reason, and didn't know why she had to be strong for anyone. She was both worried and lonely. That's why I want to be like my sister. But felt like she was still weak, maybe that's why she couldn't defeat Naraku. Tsubaki suggests that it's best for Kikyo to express those important feelings directly. While the fight between Takeru and Naraku was intense, Naraku seemed to be tired and intimidated by Takeru's strength. She didn't expect that someone like Takeru would appear. According to Tsubaki's memories, there was only one person left who could hold the divine power, so Naraku could not accept that all her efforts only resulted in Takeru imprisoning her in a weak seal. Naraku promises that once she gets out of here, she will make Takeru suffer. Meanwhile, Tsubaki is also trying her best to defeat Naraku. It may sound surprising, but Tsubaki's soul is still in his body. This means that Naraku will not be able to escape easily, as Tsubaki will hold her back until the seal is destroyed. A part of Tsubaki was also sealed in Naraku's body, so she couldn't move much either. She would try her best to tell Naraku about how amazing her sister was. She begins to say that, even if a flower is about to wither, Kikyo will not abandon it and will take care of it until the end. Hearing this makes the others realize that Tsubaki is someone more valuable than him. There is no doubt that she will become someone important in the future. Even though she doesn't like studying and often runs away, she will always come back and apologize for it. In other words, Kikyo is the epitome of potential. If Naraku thought Kikyo was weak, she was wrong. This child won't lose to her at all. Hearing that, Kikyo felt a little more motivated. Tsubaki continued to say that she knew Kikyo had been through a lot recently and she was sorry for leaving her sister to bear the burden alone. Therefore, there is no need to imitate her, because Kikyo has unique powers that only she has. The fact that you have come here is proof of that. That's why Tsubaki wants Kikyo to remember that they love everything about her. That makes her the person she is. Now all that remains is for Kikyo to acknowledge herself. This touched Kikyo, but there's no denying that it gave her a bit of a confidence boost. Since this would be the last time they would see each other for a while, Tsubaki hugged her sister tightly. Say goodbye but at the same time promised to always protect Kikyo, even if far away. Now that things had become a lot more tense, Naraku was ready to take action. But for some reason, Takeru really surprised her. Takeru's strength was unusual, as if he was stronger than even the strongest warriors in this world. After a second or two, Kikyo appeared completely healthy. Now, she has enough energy and determination to fight. Once again, she told Takeru that she felt like she could achieve anything, especially after her sister reminded her that she was strong, because she was herself and nothing more. At this moment, her power is so great that it is not easy to control. Therefore, to restrain it, a high determination is needed. When Kikyo started to attack, Takeru couldn't deny that her strength was truly incomparable right now. Kikyo is ready to end this battle once and for all. Kikyo is ready to end this battle once and for all. The unexpected turn of events was not what Naraku expected. She tried to kill Kikyo and stop her from doing what she was doing, because for some reason she feels bad about Kikyo. Suddenly, when threatened by something from Kikyo, before she could strike, Anira appeared in time, stopping Naraku. Takeru was a bit surprised to see Anira here, but knew that Anira and Kikyo had been good friends since childhood. The scene was like something out of a movie. Naraku, looking angry, started stabbing Anira to escape her grasp. But before she could seriously injure the girl, Takeru rushed in to help. With one slash, Naraku flew meters away. While Naraku was still lying there, Takeru took the time to heal Anira's wound. However, now Naraku seemed rather more upset than usual. But somehow, she couldn't understand why Takeru and Anira were willing to stand aside and let Kikyo deal with it herself, even when they knew she was in a dangerous situation. Takeru replied with a smug smile, implying that they no longer needed to protect Kikyo, as she was now ready to fight Naraku alone. As the scene becomes more tense, Kikyo concentrates, and Naraku seems tense about the current developments. Kikyo began chanting the final incantations, unleashing Aklanatha's divine power. This power truly exceeds all limits. Naraku felt like he was being torn from Tsubaki's body, and it seemed she wasn't wrong. The divine power that Kikyo had just summoned caused many changes in the air, forcing Naraku to escape from Tsubaki's body. Now that Naraku is outside, Takeru finally gets a glimpse of Naraku's true form. Without hesitation, Takeru immediately rushed towards Naraku, determined to attack no matter what. At first, Naraku was quite calm, as she thought that Takaru's attacks would be useless, since now that she was in spirit state, normal attacks would have no effect with her. Actually, that doesn't seem right. But surprisingly, Takeru was able to defeat Naraku with just one hit, causing her to feel so confused. While Takeru tries to defeat Naraku, she wonders why he can touch her, when technically he can't. In reality, Takeru was using divine fire, which was very effective against demons like Naraku. Furthermore, Takeru is not an ordinary magic user, as he is very good at fire magic. It can be said that Naraku is suffering all kinds of pain right now. To ensure this would be the end for Naraku, Takeru held her back, so Kikyo could cast her deadly spell on the stubborn demon. While they stood still, waiting for Kikyo to perform the spell to end everything once and for all, Takeru felt power radiating everywhere. Kikyo, on the contrary, also felt the enormous power coming. It was so strong that she began to feel like her body was about to break. If you're not careful, there's a high chance this power will leave you. She tried to concentrate, focusing all her attention on accumulating power, visualizing the image of flames wrapping around the sword. Since only one swing could be performed at the moment, Kikyo also had to consider Takeru's safety. Although it seems like an easy task, Kikyo is under a lot of pressure. She couldn't miss this shot, because otherwise, Takeru would most likely be in danger in the process. She also realized that if she were her previous self, she wouldn't be able to do this. Kikyo cannot control this power. However, now that she was confident in her strength, she knew that everything would be okay. Therefore, she didn't want to doubt herself anymore. With enthusiasm and determination to end this chaos, Kikyo swung a powerful blow, praying for the evil spirit to be burned away. Fire began to surround. The heat from the fire made people feel a burning sensation on their skin. In the process of projecting divine power from heaven, the mission that Kikyo had been training for so long was finally completed, as Naraku was defeated. Takeru rushed to Kikyo to help her. Noticed that she looked very tired after what she had just gone through. After a long day, they finally returned to the mansion, where Bu Duan was awaiting their return. Upon arriving, Takeru announced that the Hunter Association was working to manage the area, but they wanted Kikyo to come to headquarters first. Kikyo understands this very well, because there is still a lot of work to do. She thinks that she also has to find a new place, making Takeru wonder if that means she will leave here forever. With a smile on her face, Kikyo answered frankly that it had been decided in advance. She was only here to look after the seal, but now that it was gone, she thought it was time to rely on outsiders to take care of the dragon vein. Additionally, it is unreasonable for one person to do everything. Once the plans were arranged, Buduin asked permission to leave to start packing, and Takeru went with him. When they returned to the mansion, Kikyo began to think that at that moment she was confident that the attack would not affect Takeru. As Naraku was thrown out of Tsubaki's body, Kikyo remembered what Takeru had told her, that she was not possessed by a demon, but simply was not an enemy in his eyes. Ultimately, good and evil are both subjective concepts. She wondered if Takeru considered her a good person, but instead of worrying, she decided to be more optimistic than before. She thought that if she continued trying to become like her older sister Tsubaki, she would definitely not have difficulty imparting strength to her. With a bright smile on her face, Kikyo is ready to live a life honest with herself. While Kikyo and the others celebrated their unexpected victory, some of Naraku's subordinates seemed unable to believe that one of their strongest members had been defeated. Really lost someone who seemed like their leader. They begin to wonder if any humans are aware of their actions, or if they are just thinking too much. To ensure everything still goes according to plan, the leader plans to carefully review this issue to ensure safety. Back to Takeru. It seems like he's having a nice dream, where he and other children were happily playing outside on the grass. Everything was going well until he suddenly woke up, his mind filled with questions. On the way to school, Takeru still couldn't believe that he actually had such a strange dream. Actually, more than a dream, he felt like they were Takeru's real memories. If I remember the dream clearly, Takeru was about 5 or 6 years old. Thinking back now, when he tried to learn about Takeru and searched through photo albums, he couldn't find any photos of Takeru before he was 6 years old. According to his parents, when they moved in, his father completely deleted all the data. And if Takeru remembered correctly, Kikyo had mentioned before that separate souls often wandered in places where they had connections. So, to search for Kusanagi Takudu's soul, he may need to know more about his past. But right now, it seems like he needs to take care of a few things first. While on the way to school, Sakura called him suddenly. It seemed like a small problem had arisen, and Sakura wanted to talk to Takeru about it. In the most polite way possible, Takeru replied to Sakura's message. But what awaited him at school was something he did not expect. As it turned out, after talks with the Hunter Association, it was decided that Kikyo would start working at the academy as a part-time teacher. This surprised the other students. But Takeru was not shocked, because this was the first time in a long time that Kikyo decided to appear in public. So, what better for her to do than teach students S-rank hunters? After Kikyo was introduced, the school also announced that it had decided to have the academy participate in an exchange program with Hoshimiya. And as a result, an S-rank hunter named Saiju Karen will stay at the academy until next spring. Got everyone quite excited. After the ceremony, everyone couldn't believe that two of the best S-rank hunters had appeared at their school, especially Hunter Saiju Karen. Karen is considered the best student of all time at the prestigious Hoshimiya Academy, so the fact that she stayed at the academy for many months seemed like a dream come true for many. Knowing that Takeru used to be a big fan of Saiju Karen before losing his memory, this surprised Takeru, because they didn't have much time to talk about that topic. The two then went their separate ways. On the way home, Takeru happened to see Kikyo and Sakura talking. Without hesitation, Kikyo called Takeru, surprising Sakura because she didn't expect the two to know each other. With curiosity, she asked how they met. Kikyo immediately replied that the two were really close, to the point where they saw each other's naked bodies, which was when Kikyo accidentally took a bath while Takeru was still in the stream. Of course, Sakura misunderstood, so the two immediately tried to explain things clearly. After everything was clarified, Sakura understood both sides. Now that things were settled, Takeru asked Sakura what she wanted to say. Sakura immediately informed Takeru that after he destroyed the Ouroboros Guild, the leader of the Hunter Association knew about it. But according to Sakura's observations, the president himself took up the matter and seemed to be investigating Takeru in secret. So Sakura wondered if Takeru knew the president personally. Since Takeru has no memories of the original Takeru, this makes him wonder how the president of the Hunter Association knew of him. In fact, Sakura had no idea what their intentions were, as there were a lot of bad rumors going around. This time, two S-rank hunters appeared, so Sakura thought it was to monitor Takeru. Kikyo says she's not here for that reason and she didn't hear anything. To warn Takeru, she said that her sister left the association because it had many suspicious things, so she only joined to receive help. Takeru better be careful because they're talking about S-rankers following Takeru. Kikyo immediately thought of Saiju, who had been present at the ceremony earlier. As they started talking about her, Saiju appeared, surprising everyone by saying that she was just waiting for everyone to finish the conversation. Without hesitation, Sakura asked Saiju if she would come to school to watch Takeru. But since that wasn't the reason she came, she immediately denied the accusations. However, what she did next shocked everyone. She hugged Takeru, saying that she had always wanted to meet him. Even though she knows Takeru may have lost his memory, she still wants to be with him. Hearing this made Takeru very interesting because he really hoped to learn more about the real Takeru. So, although it seemed a bit unreasonable, he asked Saiju to tell him more about his past. Saiju seems willing to comply with Takeru's request, but only on one condition: if Takeru agrees to take her out on a date. Now Takeru has no choice but to comply with Saiju's request, and he begins to wonder what he should do on a date. Anyway, these things were strange to Takeru, since he and Edelweiss had only gone shopping a few times before, which to him, wasn't even a date. But since he couldn't do anything else and wanted to learn more about the real Takeru, he could only hope for the best. After waiting for a few minutes, Saiju finally arrived, in a simple but attractive outfit. As soon as she arrived, she immediately asked Takeru what he thought of her outfit, since she had put a lot of effort into her mature appearance. As soon as she arrived, she immediately asked Takeru what he thought of her outfit, since she had put a lot of effort into her mature appearance. Although he is uncomfortable with Saiju being near him, he tries to stay calm, as this is the only way for him to understand more about the real Takeru. When the two started dating, other guild members saw them, making everyone wonder if Takeru was also dating Sakura and Saiju. If so, he is truly a legend. Even though the guild wanted to interfere in their lives, they eventually realized it wasn't good at all. Back to Takeru and Saiju, it seems like the two of them went to the cafe. Saiju decided to act more mature today. She was wondering whether to order a new frappuccino or a stronger one. Seeing that Saiju had difficulty choosing what to order, Takeru said that he would also order the same as her. Saiju enjoyed it, and their day went quite well. She repeatedly asked him not to speak too politely to her, because it would make them both feel awkward. Finally, they began to feel comfortable with each other. Takeru finally had the courage to ask Saiju where they met. According to Saiju, there was one time when they gathered children at a high altitude to attract mana, and she met Takeru there, starting to get to know each other. This makes Takeru wonder if he really had that much mana before. Without hesitation, Saiju said that he did, even more than her. But if everything Saiju said was true, why did Takeru really let Araki bully him when he could have resisted? As the date continued, Takeru began to wonder who the real owner of this body was. After eating at the cafe, They both lay on the grass. In this moment, Takaru couldn't explain how he felt or what this situation was, because it seemed like Saiju really missed the moments with the real Takaru. Takaru apologized, saying that if she were here with the real Takaru, it would be a precious memory. In the middle of their beautiful afternoon, a group of two strangers started rushing towards them, intending to attack. But before things got worse, Takaru was able to defend himself against Saiju. However, surprisingly, it seems that this is Saiju's plan. She was suspicious of Takeru because the magic he used was stronger than normal people. Takeru tries to explain that since he lost his memory, he has been able to use it, but Saiju did not accept this answer, because according to her, even if Takeru has high mana abilities, his physical condition is not suitable for magic. So there was no way that Takeru could actually use magic. Hearing this made Takeru feel confused. But Saiju continued to say that Takeru's amnesia had no meaning, unless he becomes someone else with magical powers that match his body. Saiju wants Takeru to return the friend she loves the most, because if he doesn't, she won't forgive him. Now that Saiju was angry, she did not hesitate to fatally attack Takeru, and Takeru did not know what to do. Amid this chaos, Takeru begins to remember the time he and Edelweiss practiced magic. He repeatedly fails, and Edelweiss reminds him that he cannot master magic. Takeru felt that with this situation, he would no longer be able to use mana power in populated places. To comfort him, Edelweiss said that she thought this was because he had too much mana, making it difficult to control. She suggested that instead of trying to hit the target immediately, Takeru should consider the surrounding factors and try to keep it safe. During this time, Takeru got an idea for the next step. Seeing him go, Edelweiss felt happy and remembered what others had said, that people who were able to control magic very well were usually talented. If Takeru was trying to save them, while they were complete strangers to him, it could be said that in short order, he would succeed. Recalling these beautiful memories, Takeru has more strength to fight for his light. As Saiju's fire monster begins to attack, Takeru tries to counterattack with his power. During the fight, he tried to ask Saiju to listen to him, but it seems Saiju has no intention of doing so. As the battle becomes intense, Takeru tries his best to survive. Seeing Saiju attack, Takeru noticed that she was agile in her attacks and seemed like she was used to fighting. Based on his observations, Takeru saw that Saiju was using magic at a high level, but there was no visible damage to the surrounding areas. This means she has subtle control over magic, only hurting the target. The fire attribute is said to be difficult to control, but Hunter Saiju can freely control it at will. That's probably why she's known for her prominence. Takeru knew that if he could just defeat her to solve this problem, it would be good. But Saiju thought of Takeru and got angry, and because he knew this was all his fault, Takeru could not attack her. So he started thinking about what he should do if he couldn't get her to listen to him. Seeing Takeru go, Saiju's suspicions increased, because she knew that Takeru had never really been able to move like this, because he didn't have such reflexes. Takeru couldn't actually use magic either, so even though this man looked like Takeru, Saiju just knew that he was completely different. Just thinking about that made Saiju feel like he was going crazy. In the midst of this chaotic war, Saiju suddenly remembers when she and Takeru were children. It seems that among all the other children, Takeru is the only one who loves Saiju's fire powers, even if she hates her own flames. It seemed like Takeru couldn't help but love them. This made Saiju feel a little emotional. That's why from then on, Saiju tried his best, working hard so that the fire that once burned Takeru would never hurt him again. So if this is indeed Takeru's body, then she's sorry, but she will never forgive anyone who tries to control the love of her life. That's why even though she was trying to avoid this, she had no choice but to use her flames to force that imposter to leave Takeru's body. But before she could burn everything around her, Takeru jumped up, pinning her to the ground. It seemed that Saiju had begun to lose control over his magic. If she continued to increase her strength, there was a great risk that she would burn herself. So Takeru tried to keep her calm in this moment. To help her a little, Takeru slowly poured some of his mana into her while he controlled her magic. But no matter what he did, it seemed like the power continued to increase. Any more than that would end badly for Saiju. To calm her down, Takeru said that if she truly loved Takeru, she should stop forcing it, as this would only lead to a bad outcome. To ease her mind, Takeru decided to tell her the truth, that her guesses were not wrong, because he was not the real Takeru. But the body she was seeing was Takeru, and he promised to return it to her no matter what happened. However, despite that, it seemed like Saiju had no plans to calm down. But Takeru, with great patience, assured her that everything would be fine, no matter what she thought. He also wants the real Takeru to return. The smile on Takeru's face reminded Saiju of their childhood. So, even though it was a bit heavy on her, she started to trust Takaru little by little. After that, the magical control disappeared, and it seemed that Saiju had regained control. However, before he could do anything, Saiju suddenly started crying. It still seemed difficult for Saiju to accept that the person standing before her was not the friend she had known since the beginning of their date. Saiju thought she was calm, but in reality she couldn't handle it. This made her realize that it was not the right time to meet again. And she started to feel like she wasn't making progress. Although she had high hopes, now the situation has become calmer than before. Saiju immediately asked Takeru to tell her what was really going on and who he really was. After a few minutes of explanation, Saiju and her subordinates finally understood the situation. According to what Takaru explained, he was actually summoned to another world, saved it, and then died. Coincidentally, as soon as he woke up, he was in Takaru's body. However, even though they can accept the fact that Takaru's story is true, how can they prove that the body he took over is actually Takaru's? There's really no clear answer to this, since he doesn't have access to Takeru's actual memories. Thinking for a moment, Takeru informed Saiju that one of Takeru's friends had said that Takeru had always supported her since she was a child. So even though the two of them were separated, Takaru actually kept an eye on Saiju's activities. Hearing this made Saiju blush, because she didn't really expect that Takaru would think of her so often. Now that she's excited, she's ready to help Takeru get her friend's body back. Even though taking in all the information at once was overwhelming for her, Saiju was trying her best to trust him. To help Takeru a little, she will try to investigate this matter properly. But first, she asked his real name. Surprisingly, he also has the same name as Takeru. But for that reason, Saiju decided to call him Takeru for the time being, because if she used his last name, it would be troublesome to explain to others. Saiju then asked if he had any ideas on how to return Takeru's body. Based on what she learned from Kikyo, souls often wander in places where they have an attachment. Takaru tried to learn about his past and even asked his parents about everything, but it seemed he couldn't find any good clues. So he wants to get close to Saiju so she can tell him more about the real Takaru. To help him, Saiju told him to go to a specific location at 10 a.m. the next day. As soon as Takaru saw the marked location, he was surprised to realize that this was a crazy place, deep in the mountains. Although a bit confused, Saiju tells him to trust her because she will explain everything tomorrow. She hoped he wouldn't reveal to anyone that he was going there. With that, their date finally ended. As Saiju stepped out to leave, she told one of her subordinates, Sui, to investigate more about Takaru's situation, as well as investigating the disappearance of Yamato Takeru 40 years ago. The next day, Takaru finally arrived, and without wasting any time, Saiju immediately led Takaru inside, hoping that he would recall some of his memories. The whole place was in a dilapidated state, and looked like it hadn't been used in many years. As it turns out, this is actually a research facility, but it's also where Takaru and she grew up. This confused Takaru, so Saiju explained that when she was a child, she had no idea what they researched here. However, when she was 7 years old, the Hunter Association investigated the facility and closed it down. All she knew was that they gathered people with high mana here, so she hoped Takeru would recover some of his memories. Furthermore, she also heard that Takeru actually died when he was 6 years old, so when she saw him in the association's video, she was surprised. Is the body Takaru has really his? Saiju partly found the answer when she hugged him tightly at the park. After all, no one can fool the sense of touch when it comes to memories. She then went on to explain that after the facility was closed, children like her who had no parents or relatives were put up for adoption by the association. She thought that Takeru was also one of them, and since he hadn't heard anything from his parents, that meant he shouldn't trust them too much either. At first, Takaru didn't want to believe this, but Saiju made him realize that there was no way the association would allow someone to adopt one of their gifted children to untrustworthy people. Although it may be true, Takaru still feels that his parents' love for him is sincere. Hearing that made him feel a little sad. After all, once you start doubting something, it becomes very difficult to stop. When he was Yamato Takeru, his relationship with his parents was not good, but with Takeru it was different, because he could clearly feel that his parents loved him very much. If he lived a little longer and put in more effort than Yamato Takeru, he wondered if he could understand people's emotions better. But there's no reason to think about that now. What you need to do is move forward. As they delved into the facility, it seemed like there were monsters wandering around as well. Maybe because this place has become desolate, so you need to be careful and not destroy any more. While they fought each monster, Takaru couldn't help but feel amazed at Saiju's ingenuity. She seemed to be able to keep up with his movements, even though she was usually used to being on the front lines, and her switching between support and attack was fantastic. There was no doubt that she actually had experience fighting in a group environment, something he hoped to learn in the future. As the fight continued, Saiju noticed that the number of monsters was quite strange. There seemed to be a large gate broken somewhere. If they don't take care of it immediately, it will definitely cause a lot of damage to the facility. Thinking that he had finally arrived at a place where he could find a clue, he would try his best to make sure nothing stood in his way again. To their surprise, they were able to handle everything in one go. As they began walking around the facility again, Takeru's memories began to return little by little. It was a memory that Saiju shared. Apparently when they were kids, they both decided to bury a time capsule. Maybe that will help him regain his memories. But before he could check, Saiju called out to him because another monster had appeared. Luckily, Takeru was able to handle it with his weapon. At this point, Saiju began to find it difficult to keep up with him, even though she was the S-rank hunter here. Even though she knew she should report everything about this to the association, she still felt guilty for putting Takeru in this situation yesterday, so now she tried to stay as calm as possible, despite although it is still possible that Takeru is her enemy. She just tried to pay more attention at this time. While she was contemplating next to him, Takeru wondered why he was suddenly seeing all these images. He wondered if this was Takeru's memory, or if there was something Takeru wanted to tell him. As everything in the information room was now gone, it was as if their memories had been stolen. Takeru asked Saiju if she remembered that they buried a time capsule before. At first, she was shocked to hear this and didn't expect Takeru to remember anything. But then, after he explained that he had seen the images, Saiju began to remember something important. When they were looking for a place to bury the time capsule, they accidentally came across a door leading into the basement. But a staff member told them it was an unfamiliar area with hazardous materials, so entry was not allowed. So they buried the time capsule in the yard. With that being said, before it was time for the inspector, Saiju decided to check the basement first. When they got inside, she suddenly felt a rush of cold air, as if she was trying to learn something she shouldn't know. With every step she took, she seemed to begin to feel the weight of her past, as if her precious memories were gradually crumbling. Noticing this, Takeru assures her that no matter what happens, he will do something to solve the problem. So there's no reason for her to worry. As the conversation became more comfortable, a dark aura began to cover the entire place. Immediately Takeru went to check. Surprisingly, it seemed like the monsters that had been following him were also present here. Even they didn't expect Takeru to be here, but now that they were present, Takeru felt it was time for him to use force to force them to reveal everything they knew.